All right, guys, welcome back. I have a fantastic guest for you, my good buddy over from Remnant Finance, Hans Tui. And boy, buckle up. We go deep. The first 45 minutes of this podcast is about Hans's story, and you wouldn't believe me if I tried to retell it. So again, it's a lot. Hans is a unique guy. I got a lot of love for him. He's extremely intelligent. And at the end of the day, all we're focused on is truth and what's real and what's going to move you forward, us forward as individuals, our clients forward. So take this from that lens. But I think there's so much value in here. And again, his story on how he got into infinite banking is absolutely insane. So again, the first 45 minutes is deep into his story, but after that, we start to get more and more into IBC, and I think we talk about some things that are going to shine a light on a lot of different things you might be interested in. So stay tuned. Again, I'm going to remind you, buckle up, because this one gets a little crazy. All right, y'all, let's get into it. All right, Hans, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited to have you on. I know we're going to have a fantastic conversation. We got a ton of shit to talk about, and I really enjoyed the stuff that you and Brian put out, and a lot of the stuff that you've personally been putting out lately, because Brian's dealing with all the shit that he's dealing with overseas with the war. But I'm really happy to have you here, man, and just share your story. And as a fellow practitioner, looking forward to you sharing your viewpoint, how you got into this, what you guys are currently doing right now with Remnant, and what there is to come. So let's jump right into it and, start with the background, man, and just kind of give the people a little background on Hans.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. Good to be on the show, brother. So my company is Remnant Finance, and my business partner, Brian Moody, we started this coming up on 5 years ago. Really sort of did it as a side gig for a while. Brian had been practicing infinite banking as a practitioner for maybe 8 years now, might be coming up on 10, I'm not sure. But he'd been doing a solo practice on the side. He is a National Guard pilot out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, flies tankers, and I was a Navy helicopter pilot. And so I'll get to how I came about this, but what Remnant Finance is our joint business. As authorized IBC practitioners, we focus on obviously insurance. We have our podcast, Remnant Finance Podcast, and we generally try to approach the financial strategy of, we sort of build everything around the paradigm of protect, save, grow in that order, which obviously fits in very well to the IBC philosophy. And so, like you said, Brian is now deployed. He got mobilized from the National Guard to go overseas. And so that happened in February. He left in April, and he's been there since on basically open-ended, indefinite orders. So as of now, that is why I'm doing solo podcast, which I got to give you credit for being able to do the solo episodes every week. I've done some here and there throughout our coming up on 2.5 years of podcasting. Episode out every week. I'd say probably single digits have been me doing a solo episode. I did a few about central banking called Know Your Enemy, where I have my encyclopedia of central banking, and I basically try to take their lens and perspective so we can understand it. But I'll tell you, doing an hour of talking to the camera, talking to yourself is not easy. So respect for you doing a solo podcast.
It's definitely tough, man. But I think the stuff that you've been putting out recently has been great. Been loving it. So like you said, no end in sight for when Brian's coming back. So you're going to have to keep doing something. But, if you need a guest, I'll come on. But yeah, man, just keep chugging through. I absolutely love the stuff that you guys put out, and always so much value in it as well. So just appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think we should have you on ours just to basically do the inverse, where I want to interview you, get your background, expose our audience to you. And yeah, fortunately, there's no shortage of big headline macroeconomic news, and I am kind of obsessed with finance and economics and learning, and I try to really see. I really strive to view these stories from the lens of someone who believes the underlying narratives, right? You try to view this, we have this perspective in our community where we're approaching it from Austrian economics. We have this understanding of how we talk about and believe financial strategy works on the personal level, on the individual, family, community level, and that bends more towards Austrian economics versus the type of economics practiced by central bank and every economist in any administration, where it's a kind of a top-down public policy, monetary policy by the Fed, fiscal policy by Congress is how we steer the economy, and that's that demand side versus the kind of personal, individual, philosophy that we have. But when you're interpreting these stories, you're going to find yourself endlessly frustrated if you are of the belief that the Fed should end and needs to end and will end. You're going to be endlessly frustrated by the fact that the entire market's moving on without you, swinging with the, every time they announce a Fed rate cut or a hike or whatever, a red suit today or a red tie today, blue tie today, like the whole economic world is just going to keep chugging along. I personally believe that the dollar system will be in place for the rest of our lives. I think that there will be underlying change. We might be moving towards a digital backing of our currency, not a CBDC, but I think a stable coin working into shore up the value of a dollar. Like, I think that there's a lot of things that our community particularly, and I'll get to why our community generally is very skeptic of narratives and the experts. That is sort of our founding story and how Brian and I met. But all that to say, I'll group in the overall IBC community, we are very skeptical of the Fed, fractional reserve banking, et cetera, right? But we watch it happen and we keep thinking this has to stop. Like, how can they keep doing this? But for 5 years now, we've been saying the end is coming. We're coming to the cliff here, and they just kind of keep somehow stringing it along, right? And so my goal when I do the solo episodes, my goal is, let's take their given assumptions, i.e. that fractional reserve banking is a way to grow the economy, that, the Fed setting this interest rate range will dictate behavior, which will translate to the long end of the yield curve. And that's how we drive an economy, right? Let's take those givens, even if we don't agree with them, and try to understand them. So that's my approach to understanding economics. And I try to convey that, especially in the solo episodes. Brian is more big picture and like, how do we use IBC on a family level? I really like to nerd out, and in my background, I've got a lot of nerding out on getting into the weeds of not only IBC and insurance contracts, but really trying to understand economics. So, but before I got to that, and before I got to this role, I was a pilot in the Navy. That was my entire career from graduating high school and doing ROTC in college. All I wanted to do was fly in the Navy. I got picked up for flight school, and for the first 10 years or so, I had a phenomenal career flying. I flew the H-60 Romeo. It's a surface search and attack helicopter. So I got 3.5 years stationed in Japan, got to fly all around the Pacific, saw some really cool port visits, did well as far as our career progression goes. And things were tracking along great. I was coming up in my last 2 years of my initial service obligation. After you get your wings, you have about a 9-year commitment after about 2 years or so of flight school. So at this point, the final 2-year tour is where people make the decision, am I going to stay in the Navy and continue on, sign a contract to continue, or now that I can finally pull chocks and get out, I'm going to go jump ship to the airlines. And that's where the airlines come knocking and they say, we can offer no deployments, we can double your pay, we'll give you a big bonus, and you're already basically trained up. It's a great deal for them because they don't have to do the training. You've got someone who's been flying in very dynamic conditions for a decade, has seen everything under the sun as far as like what can go wrong. And so it's a good deal, and it's a good time when a lot of people get out and go airlines. And so the Navy has to incentivize people to stay in. And so I opted for that final 2-year tour. I applied for a program to do grad school instead of doing a deploying tour. I didn't want to go back on a boat. I just spent a few years deploying on a carrier, and I wanted to do something different. So I applied for a program and got picked up for it. And they basically said, apply to grad school wherever you want to go, and we'll pay the bill. Get whatever degree you want. Okay. This sounds too good to be true. And since I did this, that program has been shuttered because the value proposition, maybe I might be responsible for them shuttering it because it was a total loss for them. They got $0 out of the investment. It cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars for my degree, and they got 0 flight hours from it. And I'll tell you why, and we'll get to that. But I ended up I went to Cambridge, Massachusetts. My wife and I had just gotten married. A few months later, we moved to Cambridge. I started the Masters of Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and that is effectively kind of a breeding ground and a mandatory stopping point for politicians and policymakers. The cool thing is, at that school, when you are when there's a Republican in office, which there was at the time, all of the Democrat cabinet members drop out of the White House, out of the cabinet, out of the administration, and they go to Harvard Kennedy School and resume their professorships. And then when there's a Democrat in office, they all get sucked back up. So names, if you track politics, there's a lot of names that you would recognize when a Republican's in the White House. You could look through the whole staff of the Harvard Kennedy School and see a lot of names that you see in the news. And then when there's a Democrat, so in my case, a lot of Obama cabinet officials are now professors there. Former Secretary of States, SecDefs, like UN representatives, and then also a bunch of senators, congressmen, et cetera. People do teaching fellowships there. And then when Biden was elected, they all went back. So now if you looked at the list, or I guess not, during Biden, if you looked at the list of Harvard Kennedy School professors, you wouldn't recognize anybody, most likely. But I was there at a unique time. And so even though I didn't agree with them on just about anything, it was pretty interesting to have, like Larry Summers was one of my economics professors, right? Former, he's been in every role. Same with Janet Yellen, and she was another professor. She was a visiting professor, but having Larry Summers and Janet Yellen, like two of the king and queen of central banking, on the short list of names who have done every role under the sun in the economic world as professors, was a very interesting experience. I hadn't come around to this idea. This was the very beginning of kind of scales falling off my eyes and learning to rethink my thinking. And so I was starting to do that there because I went into Harvard with this idea of I'm a conservative American guy. Like, I'm very, very conservative. I go in with a kind of generic, what I would say like a watered down generic version of being a conservative. And I knew I wasn't going to fit in. And we have this kind of idea of like what leftist academia looks like, right? We can all picture what the professors look like, what the protesting students look like. They're protesting everything. If it's a day ending in Y, they've got some gripe, some victimhood, discrimination, protesting something, right? I went in knowing I wasn't going to fit in, but I didn't realize the degree of how extreme they are in every single position they have. It's like there's no point in having a conversation, and they always talk about, let's have a dialogue. We need to have a conversation about this. I'm like, you don't want a conversation. You just want to shout, and you want someone to bend the knee to the most extreme possible political viewpoints. And so I really kind of got this eye opening of like I knew I wouldn't fit in. The scary thing is my classmates, who I kind of viewed as these cartoon characters, just as a quick example of like a day in the life at this institution. And higher education is very left leaning, obviously, right? Like 95% of professors are very left leaning. Harvard is the epicenter of that, and Harvard Kennedy School, public policy school, is that's all there is. Like, if Hillary Clinton went there, she would be viewed as a right wing extremist, right? That's how far left they are. But just an example of like your day to day there, walking into a class and seeing a girl in tears because she wasn't deferential enough to the opinion of the king victim, right? They have a victimhood hierarchy, right? The further you are away from me, straight white male, the further you are away as far as like your traits of victimhood, the more credibility you have to speak in class. And so seeing professors cater to this, and seeing a girl in tears because she didn't have the right stickers on her water bottle because the king victim is berating her in front of everyone, it's pretty shocking to see. Or we have name placards, and you have them on the like the kind of auditorium style seating. You put your name placard there, and my classmates protested and wouldn't go to class until they put gender pronouns on our name placards. And so the administration instantly caves because they do. Basically, every professor starts their semester with two things. We have to recognize that the university, Harvard University, is on stolen ground, and we are here. We have stolen ground from Native Americans, and we are sorry as a university. The second thing they say is, as a white male, I understand I have privilege, and there's no way I can possibly understand that, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to get on my knees, and basically I'm just going to kiss your feet of anyone who's not white. Like, that's the ideology. That's how every class starts, and that's not an exaggeration. So my class is protesting these the not having pronouns on our name placards, and the administration instantly says, okay, we'll get pronouns on our name placards. And so everyone has the option to go and pick up their stickers to add to their name placards if they are a he, she, or a they, them. So most of the class goes. I'm not a crazy person, so I don't do that. So they were protesting because they were mad because, one, it wasn't mandatory, and I'm not going to do that. And two, there weren't enough options, right? And so it's like they're protesting their protest. And so that is the level that I kind of saw there. And I was like, okay, you guys are making me, to you, I'm an extremist. To me, I'm pretty just like typical conservative. You just pick any guy in the military, like I'm probably right along the, right in the center there, right? You guys are making me an extremist. And so I just totally disconnected from any kind of thoughts on, I'm going to learn about international relations and public policy and how do you interact. Like the whole thing was like, let's have these conversations that bridge the gap of differing viewpoints. And in reality, there is no attempt at any of that. It's just like, it is like a bludgeoning of like, if you are not compliant with everything that we say, whatever the new cause du jour is, whoever is the top victim, you're just going to get shut down. We have no interest in outside opinions. And so you can kind of see that it's like what happens at Harvard happens in the rest of academia. What happens in academia happens at a public policy level. And I think a lot of the insanity that we see, I can now kind of trace back to that. And it's like, I know the kind of person that implements these policies now that are so destructive later. And so it was a very interesting kind of realization for me of like, do not depend on the government to help you. Not that I ever did, but especially now seeing the inputs and like the output makes sense. And so I'm very much do it yourself. You need to understand this. You need to be an expert in these things. Do not like the government can only make something worse. And so never rely on them for your financial or your financial advice or your health advice. And so this distrust of experts that translated eventually to accepting and embracing IBC as a philosophy started with, I see the expert class here. I see how they're taught. And a lot of the actual experts, the central banking experts, like the macro, the economists, people that you see on TV, foreign affairs, like we had Obama's Secretary of Defense was a professor, Ash Carter, and so people rushed to sign up for his class because this is cool. You get to take someone who is just the Secretary of Defense and get to take his course and taking the course. And you're like, wait a second, this is not like rigorous public policy analysis. This is just more political posturing, and so. I had like a total shattering of any remaining adherence I had for the expert class, I would say, before things went off the rails. This is the fall of 2019. I start my first semester. And so, but a great time, like for coming from a Navy environment where you're deploying and you're on someone's schedule, like to be able to just be effectively a civilian, grow out a beard. I had no interaction with the Navy apart from just checking into the ROTC unit. So on paper, I'm there, but for all intents and purposes, I'm by myself. Like it's just we're traveling all around New England. We're skiing. We're taking like Cambridge in the fall is just absolutely beautiful. Like it was a really cool one normal semester that I had. Normal is not like in the classroom environment. It is very much not normal. But as far as getting to just early on in our married life, just getting to live in a cool town. Travel around, have a lot of flexibility that we didn't have when I was, active duty, or I was still active, but it actually had a squadron. It was really cool, and so we had a great experience there. But then March of 2020 happens, and we are told, "Hey, this is a super." Yeah, that's just the teaser. I mean, it gets crazy. So as we all know, we all live through the insanity, right? But yes. Like on a good day, Cambridge is nuts, right? It's the epicenter of insanity on a good day. So when COVID comes around, it's next level. And so I remember they said this virus is going to be so deadly that we are going to, for the first time in the 400 years of this school, we're going to go to remote online classes. So spring break is in 2 weeks. When you come back from spring break, don't move back to Cambridge. If you need to move your stuff out of your apartment now, you can. But we're not coming back in person for the rest of this school year and possibly the next year. And so I thought, okay, what about the next 2 weeks? No, business as normal. business as usual. Just come to class. And so
No,
by this point, I know
there's a 2 week start when you gotta, they told
yeah,
everybody it's not going to do anything for this next 2 weeks.
yeah, yeah. And so knowing my classmates by that point, I know you're about to become tyrannical. 3 weeks from now, if I was sitting in this classroom next to somebody, you would have an aneurysm, right? Because I'm a super spreader. But for the next 2 weeks, the same exact people who it was pretty easy to foresee at the time that these people would lose their mind, embrace every single thing they're told, and get aggressively like self-censoring and self-policing of each other. Happened exactly like that. But for those 2 weeks, we're just sitting there in class next to each other. No precautions for the deadly virus that's going to just kill everyone. And so I kind of just right off the bat, I was like, this is strange. I don't really think I buy this. If you're not worried now, what is this 2 week window here? So my first kind of indication, like I don't whatever's coming, I think it's not real, like not to the degree it's going to be. I know you're a big traveler, so you'll appreciate this. We were going to go to Dublin for spring break. We were going to go to the St. Paddy's Day Parade, and I had the itinerary. I had all the Airbnbs booked. We're going to do a really cool 8 days and start in Dublin, end in Dublin, but see some really cool areas. On this week-long trip there. And so my boss of the ROTC unit, the commanding officer, calls me and was like, "Hey, you're canceling your trip, right?" And I said, "No, I'm not canceling the trip. Like, planes are still flying. The beer is still pouring. Like, of course we're going to go to St. Paddy's Day. I'm looking forward to it." And he's like, "Don't you know there's a virus?" I'm like, "You mean the one that's supposed to hit in 2 weeks after and not come back for spring break?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm still going to go to the trip." And he's like, "Well, it's recommended that you cancel your travel plans." I said, "All right, are you ordering me to cancel my flight?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, well, then we're going to do the flight unless I'm ordered to not go on the flight." And I don't understand how that could even be a legal order. But he said, so he hung up the phone. And then as the days get closer, he keeps reaching out and berating me more and more of like, "How dare you?" He was a submarine guy. I was a pilot. So, and like, it doesn't matter to me what he thinks, we're not in the same chain of command other than that. Like, he's just signing an admin paperwork for me for the next 2 years, basically an attendance roster. Am I still present and alive and in Cambridge? So I didn't really have this relationship with him. I had never actually met him in person, and I didn't care what he thought. So I was just like, well, if you're not ordering me, I'm going to go. Like, and probably I'm not going to follow these precautions, but I'll tell you that I'm going to follow these precautions when I'm there. And so the day of our flights, we're flying out at like 6 p.m. from Boston to Dublin, and I remember being at a dog park. We're packed, we're ready, and he's calling me, and he's like, "I cannot believe, like, I would never trust you as an officer, as a leader. This is the kind of leadership you're going to show people. I can't believe you're going to be going to a squadron as an 04 and leading people when you have such terrible decision making." I'm like, well, I've thought through like the risk matrix. Like, as a pilot, we are pretty well trained on risk decisions here. I said the threat is exceptionally low. This appears to be a flu, maybe a bad bug, but I'm as healthy as I can be. I'm not really worried about getting the flu. These precautions that you're talking about are nonsense. Like the fact that you're trying to get people to put a bandana over their face and you're saying this is an airborne pathogen, it's like, you guys are still going to the grocery store. You're still going to the liquor store. You're still going to get dog food. Like, you don't actually believe this. You just don't want the social shame of not complying, right? And so he's just berating me. And then eventually, right about maybe 2 hours before we're going to leave for the airport, Dublin, Ireland shuts down all pubs in the country. And so then I called him and I said, "All right, we're canceling the trip."
Man, it's funny that you say that, because that was like what, second week of March or something? Because
yeah, I'd say like March 20th. I remember because that was when the market just took its 30% flash crash. So it was around that time.
We travel every March for my birthday. And March 2020, we were on our way to Greece beginning, and we had gotten to the airport in DC to fly over to Athens, and Trump had announced, "Hey, if you're out of the country, get back because we might be shutting it down." And so we're like, we were supposed to go to Greece for 2 weeks. We're like, we'll take our chances. It was me, my family, some friends. The friends that were going decided they were on a different flight. They were already in the air. They landed, heard the news, turned around, got back on a plane, came back. We went over there for 2 weeks. Some things were shut down and stuff, but we're like, Cool. We enjoyed ourselves, had a great time, and then came back, and here I am.
Somehow you survived. You're a survivor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they hadn't closed down every pub in Ireland, like we would have gone. But if you're going for the St. Patty's Day parade and like,
Yeah.
Not worth it. So we canceled the trip and we just traveled around Vermont. And I remember telling my wife, like, I remember being in a hotel room in Burlington, Vermont. Things are starting to close down. It's like empty streets, but there's still, places are still open. They're just, everyone's kind of weird. And I just remember thinking, like, you guys are all reacting to the news. Like, you're just watching the news. Like, none of your lives need to change. You're just watching the news, and the news doesn't make sense. Like, none of these stories add up, right? They'll show us a news story, and it's like, wait a second, now we find out that was actually footage from 3 years ago, but you're saying this is bodies piling. It's like the whole thing was very fishy to me from the start. And then that skepticism continued as the policy proposals got more and more preposterous.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we all remember, you have to wear your mask into the restaurant, and then you can sit down and you can take your mask off when you take bites. And I remember just having these conversations. I was the guy at that time. I was like, I'm not going to do this. Like,
there was wild shit. I was in a bar in, I don't know what city. And Amanda and I go in, and they have like their little squares or fucking whatever that just stand in and whatnot to create spacing. And they would allow you to have your mask off while sitting down and drinking. But if you stood up, you had to have your mask on. So I was under the assumption that COVID was like around a certain height level where you could catch it. But if you were down lower, that you couldn't. It was just the wildest stuff. And not that I've ever been, again, I don't talk politics on this show, and so people don't know if I'm left or right, but I couldn't be more not one or the other. I think people on both sides are just insane. And so I just kind of live my own life and trying to do the things that I think are right. But this was a clear, like the whole COVID thing was a clear just message that, oh my God, like they have no idea what they're doing. They're literally just making shit up as they go, and they can easily do whatever they want. And, the whole belief in this country and everything that it provides people with is just like, just want you to know, like, they say all these things, you're free, you're this, you're that, but just look at what happens when they don't want that to be the case.
Exactly. And that was like, they're either guessing or they're lying. There's no scenario where standing in 6 feet apart from someone at a liquor store is going to protect you from a virus. Like, that's so stupid. That's so idiotic that, now we can only laugh at it. But at the time, it's like, the fact that there was the level of compliance that there was, to me, was very disheartening. I would never change any of it because of the trajectory that it put me on.
Yeah, we're getting to infinite banking, you guys. He's telling you the backstory and how that.
We'll get there. Yeah,
buckle up. Like I said before, buckle up. You're in for a long podcast.
And it ties in, I think, because it is like the whole idea of rethinking your thinking and being able to think, maybe I was wrong and let me review. And so going through all this, I'll tell my story of the most preposterous thing I remember was I had a few buddies that came in. They flew into town. We're going skiing. We go ski in Vermont. We come back to New Hampshire, and because my wife and I moved up to my in-laws' place in New Hampshire because Cambridge was a ghost town, right? Like they fully lost their minds, and so New Hampshire, live free or die, was fairly reasonable. As in, like, the brewery where I wrote my thesis, they would say, okay, the state says we have to do this. We're going to do exactly that and no more. And so the state says you can't stand at the bar and have a beer. So we're going to put a piece of tape 1 foot away from the bar, and you can order your beer at the bar, but you have to take one step back, and now you can drink your beer. Like, they're mocking these stupid rules, right? And the New Hampshire rules were like 20% retarded, right? Cambridge was 110% retarded, and the businesses then followed up with like another level on top of that. And so we just had to get out of there. And so we spent most of that time in New Hampshire afterwards. And I remember we went to a biker bar there in Laconia. Laconia's got Laconia Bike Week after Sturgis. It's like the number 2 bike rally in the country, right? I'm not a biker, but it was really cool just because the whole area gets packed with Harleys. And so there's this biker bar there that's pretty famous. And so we go, I take the guys there because they're open. They don't care at all about any of this. And so this place is packed. Right. And most of the other places were fairly like following some kind of protocol, as stupid as they were. They're just, hey, we're trying to stay in business. So yeah, put this little piece of plastic between you two and like, we will pretend like this does something, even though we all know that we're all just LARPing here. But this biker bar didn't care at all. It was packed. Standing room only at the bar. Every table's packed. But the bartender told us, she said, hey, just a heads up, every like on the hour, ATF comes in and does an inspection. And you'll know, and we'll ring a bell. And so, no joke, we're standing there at the bar, have our beers, and the bell rings, and everyone around us that's standing at the bar squats down, does an air squat. No joke. So they're like a foot lower than they were. Right? No joke. 200 people probably air squatting in place. And these two like bull dykes walk in khaki cargo pants, these big buzz cut ATF agents. They come in, they stand there, they shine a flashlight around, they look around, they stand there for no joke. It felt like 5 minutes, and I'm like, my thighs are burning because I'm
come
like,
on, man, I wasn't training for this.
Like, what are we doing? And so everyone's just still standing there drinking beer. Their bartenders are still serving, and people are like crouched down. I mean, it felt like something out of a comic book. It was so stupid, and then they just leave, and everyone just goes back to their business. And I was like, this is. If anyone comes out of this experience, including the ATF agents, and thinks there's any medical merit to any of this, like there's no bridging the gap there. And that's it's kind of like I learned with my classmates, like there's no possible way that we will ever have a productive conversation. I have no interest in finding common ground towards the pursuit of public policy. Like that mirage was shattered to me the second I had my first class. And so in the same vein, it's like, we still have people here in Coronado where I live still walking around with masks. Not many of them, but you still see people. I'm like, what do you possibly think that's doing? And so these experts telling you these narratives like, don't wear a mask because they don't work. We just proved here's a scientific paper that says they don't work. Stay 6 feet apart. Okay, actually here's 6 feet apart was made up and has no medical bearing. Okay, but we're still listening to them. And so to me, I lost all faith in the medical industry. And at the same time, this whole time, like my story with getting to IBC goes through the COVID shot. That is really the pinnacle moment. If I had to identify one thing, like this is leading up to my distrust of experts. But recall, this feels like ancient history, but recall for the entire time that we're leading up to the COVID shot, that whole period, all the news is talking about, will we get a vaccine? When will it come out? Will it be 6 months? Will it be 9 months? I can't wait till we get a vaccine. We can go back to normal. And why are we thinking this? Is because they're pre-programming us. They're telling us this. And I remember hearing about a booster before there was ever even a shot. Like, will we need 2-year boosters? How many boosters will we need? And so they're talking about this. And I remember having these conversations with my wife of like, this is coming and the Navy's going to mandate this. I guarantee it. And they're going to mandate boosters. And so the thing is, at this point, there's no shots at all. They're rushing these things through, but there's no shots. And so when the media is having is continuously mentioning, will we need a booster or not? They're already assuming the premise that there will be a shot that you need, right? Which is a great leap to make logically when one doesn't exist and two, you definitely don't need it. And so this whole thing is happening. And for a year, we're hearing about the shots will be here and save us, and then we'll need a booster. And so by the time the shots actually do come out, the Navy doesn't mandate them yet because they're not authorized. And so again, I know this sounds like nothing to do with IBC. Political experts shattered. Now medical. Because what happened, and just a background for the fight that we had with the military, when the FDA approves a product, effectively simplifying it, there's a 2-part process. So we're just going to call it Part A and Part B. Part A, they say, here is what we would do. Like, here's the ingredients list that we're going to put in here. And here's how the science behind what we're going to do and how it will improve health outcomes. Part B is here's our distribution schedule. Here's here's where we're going to manufacture it, how we're going to manufacture it. Now, this is not precise. Like, this is not exactly, but generally speaking, here's the bait and switch and here's the con that was pulled. Part B says, here's the actual manufacturing plan. Part A is here's the shot itself, right? So think like the product and then the business plan. That's sort of my understanding of this FDA process, which typically takes close to a decade for a vaccine. Well, they rush through and they rush through with what's called emergency use authorization, EUA. That stems back to anthrax shots in the military at around the 2000 timeframe. They had so many injuries from that people sued and won. The only time people successfully sued and won against the DoD, that they had this new category of medical products called EUA, emergency use authorization. what that says is we can bypass the normal production. We can bypass the safety tests because the risk of the illness or the virus or whatever is so great that it outweighs the risk of rushing getting this thing to market with no testing. What that does for the producers, the manufacturers, is no liability because the government says, hey, the need is so great that you can skip all the liability components and you can skip the human trials and all the years of testing required. You can skip it all. And you get liability protection, right? Because we need this product on market ASAP. Okay, that's EUA. But in the documents, the U.S. code that allows for that, it specifically says when you take an EUA product, it inherently means there hasn't been human trials, and therefore, by taking that, you're part of the ongoing human trials, and so you can't force anyone to. No joke traces back to Nuremberg Code. You can't force somebody into a medical experiment, and so because you can't force someone to participate in a medical experiment, you can't force someone to take an EUA product, including a vaccine. By the way, masks are EUA; they're not medically authorized; they're EUA products. That's why you never actually had to wear a mask. The EUA shot that they said we rushed this to market. Give us the liability protection because you are demanding that we have a product here. And so here's the product. Now, nobody has to take it. And literally the verbiage in the US code that allows this to be a thing says every single person has the right to refuse. Of course, you can't be forced to participate in a medical experiment. That's Nuremberg Code. Not only that, but the provider has to tell you that you have the right to refuse. If whoever gives you this shot, they have to tell you have the right to refuse, and no repercussions can come from your refusal to be a part of the live ongoing human trials, right? That's an EUA product. They did that. They came out with an EUA version, but you can't force someone to take an EUA product. And so what they did was the military put an intense pressure campaign and said, we need 100% vaccination, but we can't order you. And so they get about 99% of the way there. Most people, they threaten liberty. They said you can't take leave. You're going to have to stay in quarantine. You're going to have to stay in the barracks, whatever. They put in a very intense, illegal pressure campaign against the military and got very high compliance rates. And they said, we can't order you to take this, but if you don't, we're going to note it. And it's like people complied pretty quick. And there were some of us that held out and said, no, I'm not going to do it until there's at least an approved one. You can't order me to take us and you can't give me repercussions. And so I didn't take it and I held out for the entire time we were there. What happened in August of 2021 was effectively a backdoor deal where they got a headline where they said, we've got an approved shot. It was August 21st, 2021. The FDA says we've approved the COVID shot for these three producers. August 23rd, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin mandates it. He said, now I can order you to take it. So now you 1% who haven't taken it, I'm ordering you to take it now. So the message comes down. Punishment is swift. Punishment is severe if you don't follow a lawful order, right? But the bait and switch and what they actually did was they approved Part A, going back to my initial thing. They never approved Part B. And documents that got exposed in courts in discovery, the DOD said, hey, we need a headline saying it's approved. We know Part B is not going to happen. We know you're never going to assume liability for this product because they're already killing people. There's already huge spikes in cardiac issues in young people, cancer and turbo cancer, like all that stuff is happening now. We know you're not going to be on the hook liable for this. And so we know you'll never produce them. And Pfizer, these companies said, yeah, we're not going to produce these approved. We're only ever going to produce these EUA. And the DOD in emails that were proven in court said, we know, but we need a headline. So basically give us a headline that says you approved. And they said, okay, cool. Part A approved. We now have an approved COVID shot. It's Part A, by the way. It's not Part B, right? But the DODs took that and ran with it, mandated it. And so I got plugged in with a group of pilots that were fighting the mandate, that weren't going to take it for various reasons. One, it's illegal. It's an unlawful order. Two, a lot of people had religious accommodation requests because all of these testing of every vaccine involves millions and millions of aborted fetal tissue. And so people have an issue with that. People had admin exemptions. People had all kinds of reasons for not wanting to take this, mainly the fact that it's not tested and that there's no need for the healthiest segment of the population on average to take a vaccine against the flu that was rushed through for production, right? So a lot of people, the remaining 1% or so who hadn't taken it, this didn't really move the needle. If you've gone through the pressure campaign up to this point, them saying it's approved, it got a few more, but not really. And so the DOD offers some exception admin paperwork routes. And so I filed a religious accommodation request and I said, I don't want to take this. And they are required to treat you as if you're compliant until you have final adjudication on that within 30 days. So a lot of us submitted admin, medical, religious exemption requests and were promptly denied without them looking at it. We found out later that the Navy had a process where they had a standard process that said, here's when you get an RA request, here's how you deny it. Not here's how you evaluate and decide if you're going to approve or deny. Here's the workflow, how you deny it, and then we're going to rubber stamp it at the end. So we're getting rubber stamp denials back with our names misspelled, our branches off being, branch of service being off, your designator, like what you do being wrong, all kinds of errors, because they're basically just flowing it through a pipeline that says when it comes in, it goes through this channel to get denied, right? And so that was a process. And so they got denied, and then we appealed because we have the right to appeal, and they just sat on those appeals and never answered. My appeal got approved about a week before I separated because I knew I was getting out. 3 years later at this point. But what happened was I got back to San Diego. I had signed a 3-year contract to keep flying. And the second I checked into the squadron here, I got benched. And they said, you can't fly because you're a health threat and you're not a priority anymore because you can't fly. And so a squadron has 4 or 5 O4s, like one tier below the senior officers. And so it's a pretty big impact to my future squadron when they're like, wait a second, we're not getting this guy, this O4. We have all of our plans built around getting an O4 coming in for a 3-year tour, and we're not going to get him. And so I'm getting this pressure here, but I'm not going to take it. And so I sit and I wait and I get benched. And every day I check the flight schedule and I'm not on the flight schedule for the next day. And they wait me out for 2 years where I'm getting paid to effectively be a stay-at-home dad. And so on one hand, like I got a lot of time with my daughter that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But I'm being paid to sit at home and not fly. They spent well over, I'd say $140,000 on my degree alone, plus living in Cambridge, PCSing me across the country twice. Like they spent a lot of money on my degree and they had gotten 0 flight hours from me. The mandate's lifted. They say, okay, there's no longer a mandate to take the shot. You are free and clear. And I said, well, I still am waiting on the results of my accommodation request. You owe me that legally. It's your process. I followed your process. And they said, well, we're just forget about that.
Yeah.
just forget about it. No problem. And they said, okay, well, you can start your timer now for your 3-year contract. And I said, start my timer? What do you mean? I'm on my timer. I'm followed every order except for the one that you guys admitted in court was unlawful. And the Navy, by the way, in this time period, got taken to court and lost and admitted in court. That's where it came out in discovery that we were rubber stamping these denials. It also came out that they were the ones who basically ordered the FDA to give them a fake approval. It also came out that they knew there would be no approval and that they knew this was an unlawful order. And so we were vindicated, but still punished. And so they said, you have to start your 3-year timer over. Otherwise, you're going to be in breach of contract. I said, that's not how a contract works. I just took an elective at Harvard Law for fun because I'm a nerd. I took contract law at Harvard Law as an elective for fun. And by the way, you can't do this because in order for me to be in violation of my contract, you have to allow me the opportunity to fulfill it. And then you've ordered me to not fly. You've ordered me to not advance on orders to my squadron. You've benched me for 2 years. That's called frustration of contract. I can't be guilty of breaching a contract that I was physically barred from fulfilling. So therefore, if you want more time from me, they're saying you need to extend from June 24 to at least August of 2026 or beyond. I said, if you want those extra 2 years, you have to, per contract law, here's contract law, it says it black and white, you have to offer me new consideration, i.e. you have to pay me more money, offer me more money, and then I can decline that or I can accept it. But you can't just change the terms of a contract that exists. And they said, well, you're going to be in breach of contract if you don't accept orders to your squadron. I said, I accept orders to my squadron, but I'm going to hold you to the contract that you wrote and I signed that says I'm separating in June of 2024, right? At this point, I had been paid 2 of my 3 bonus checks, $20,000 each year. It's a $60,000 contract. So I got the first 2. The third one, they canceled. I got $15,000 after tax when it hits my deposit. I get a $20,000 bonus. I pay $5,000 to the government of their bonus money back. I get $15,000 hit my account. So I've gotten 30 over the course of 2 years. I've been paid 40 on paper, but I received 30 after tax. And they canceled the third check of 20. And they also went back and they said, okay, you're in breach of contract. So we're going to take back your bonuses. We're going to cancel the third bonus check and your monthly fly pay, which is an incentive for pilots. We're going to go back retroactively for a few years and pull that back as well. So they tacked me about $50,000 of debt plus a canceled check for $20,000. And so I said, hey, that's not legal. Like, again, I'm writing to the head JAG at the detailing office. I'm trying to involve my superiors, my bosses, the O6s in charge of me. And I'm like, hey, here's U.S. contract law. here's the EUA law. Like you already know in court that this is an unlawful order because the Navy's admitted it. But like I have violated no laws. I have followed every lawful order. I'm in full compliance with my contract. But here's what they're trying to do. They're trying to send me on 1-year orders across the country just to kill off the rest of my time and make it painful. And they're going to put me in 50 grand of debt and cancel my third check of 20 grand. I said, can you step in here? I know you know the guy. I know your boys with the guy at the detailing office. Like you guys flew together. Like, can you just tell him? Just send a text and be like, hey, let's pump the brakes on like Stasi's. That was my call sign, was Stasi. Like, let's pump the brakes on this punishment here because he's legally correct, medically correct, ethically correct, and administratively correct. Can you pump the brakes? I said, can you just make a call and like have them pause while the JAGs review this? And every single boss I had, ones I was tight with, like I was one of their lead pilots, like really good relationships with, and they all said, hey, I'm sorry, this sucks.
I would love
like,
to do that, but no.
Yeah, I would love to, but this is not my hill to die on. This is your hill to die on. I'm like, no, you're my leader. Like, what is your hill to die on if it's not this? Like, your role, you're an administrative leader at this point. You're an 06, I'm an 04 working for you. What is your hill to die on? Like, what do you have? What are you preserving here? Like, honor, courage, commitment is what you talk about. I realized that career preservation was the primary value of Navy officers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm fighting this thing alone. They sent me to Virginia. They said, hey, we have 1 more year left on your contract and you turned down orders. I said, no, I didn't. I accepted every order. You guys breached contract. I'm going to prove that later on. You guys breached contract, but I have 1 more year left. You're right. So they said, okay, well, we really need you on this ship in Virginia to do this 03 job. I said, that doesn't make sense. Like I live in San Diego. I can see from my balcony. I can see about 40 ships in the bay, San Diego Naval Base. I know manning, not one of those ships is anywhere near 80% manned. There's a manning crisis in the Navy. I know those 40 ships could use me for 1 year. And I'm that's the most I'll be on board. So why are you writing me orders to Norfolk, Virginia when I live in San Diego? You're going to incur the cost for me to PCS to Norfolk and back twice. And on a ship doing an 03 job that doesn't, like, there's no way this is, and he's like, sorry, man, I have nobody else. I said, yes, you do. Every pilot in the Navy is eligible for this. It's an 03. This is an 03 job. Every 03 pilot coming up on this tour is eligible. He said, sorry, man, I have nobody else, and this is my top priority billet. I get to the ship. I move out there by myself. My wife and my daughter stay here. I move out to the ship. I'm living in a camper in Little Creek, Virginia. I check into the ship, and they're like, this isn't a job. Like, what do you mean? How are these your orders? There must be a mistake. We already have this job filled. Your person who's doing the job on your orders checked in a month ago. Like, this doesn't make sense. And I said, no, it does. It's punishment. They're like, should we call the detailers and tell them they made a mistake? I'm like, no, they did this intentionally. And so, I waited out for a year. I have no job on the ship. I have no role there. They assigned me a division or a department just to like, I kind of covered down for someone who was a different department for someone who was checking in. So I'm the safety officer on this ship. I have no training. It's not my role. Like, I'm not a ship person, but I'm the safety officer and I have a small division on the ship. And so I just said, like, screw it. I'm here for a year. I'm going to do what I can to help these people that work for me. I have no career to salvage. I have no resume or fitness report, we call it, like basically your evaluation marks. I was like, I have nothing to salvage here. I could walk off with a 0% rating. It doesn't really work that way, but like, if it were on a 0 to 100 scale, most people want to get 100 or a good rating for the next jobs, right? I was like, I'll take a 0. I don't care at all. Rank me last, whatever. I'm going to do everything I can to just lay it all out on the field for these guys. If they need classes, if they want to do special training or whatever for their careers, I will do whatever I can. And so I just kind of went in and I was like, I'd find people that didn't want to take the flu shot, for instance, and I'd email them and tell them, here's exactly how you get out of it, because it's not legal for them to order that either. Same thing with this. There was guys on the ship that didn't want to take COVID shot. They were being punished. I got them in touch with lawyers. Now we've all won those cases. And it was like, I'm just going to be a bull in a china shop here because I have no connection to this ship. But I separate. And when I separate, I leave with about, at this point, what's accumulated to about $55,000 in debt, plus that check canceled for 20. And when you separate, they transfer that debt to the Treasury. And the Treasury slaps on 30% just because why not? And so about 70 grand or so is my debt to the Treasury. that's still ongoing. That's in collections right now. And we've won our lawsuit. Fortunately, there's some lawyers that saw how blatantly obvious this was, how black and white.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
this is
they're
the
not tied
easiest.
to the military, so they're like,
Yeah.
this is
This is the
obvious.
easiest win ever. Like, you guys broke every single law. And so we have since won the lawsuit. And tomorrow, actually, I have my first appointment. The way that class action against the military works is not like a normal class action where everyone gets the same payout. They take named plaintiffs, and they took like 8 guys, and they said, these are our named plaintiffs. They get the verdict. And once their verdict is upheld, when they get their verdict, it applies to everyone else, and they get their own day in court. So those guys went 8 for 8. They won. So now I'm going into my meeting tomorrow, and now it's like I've already won the case. My verdict is win, or whatever. Navy's verdict is guilty. It's just a matter of what am I going to get repaid, and so that's what we're going to start working towards. And so it's been a very eye-opening, like full distrust of the medical system, full distrust of the political public policy sphere. I lost all faith in the experts, but at the same time, this is like, these are still just days that are slowly passing by, and I'm trying to learn. And so that's when I dove into insurance. So after all that, 50 minutes in.
Man, yeah, if you guys handled through that 50 minutes, which is the craziest intro into IBC I've ever heard, or just fucking life in general, like it's unbelievable what power or assumed power gives you a belief that you can do. Just, I mean, again, there's so many ways, so many different places that you could take that. But now that you've lost all belief in any of these systems, I think you've set up a great foundation for why you're like, yo, this book, this concept, all of this stuff is just, it's for me. It couldn't be more for me. So let's lay that out, because
Let's do it.
Jesus, what a fucking intro.
Yeah. And if anyone's still listening, thanks. And our podcasts are very unfiltered. So if you're not used to, like, we're not a political podcast, but we don't shy away from any views. It's like we're IBC focused, financial strategy focused, and then we just send it, and we don't ever try to cater for mass appeal.
There's no sugarcoating and shit like that.
mechanism.
It's just,
Yeah.
like you said, our views on some things may not be exactly aligned. I don't know what those things are. We'd have to talk about views. But as far as like all of that is just absolutely insane. And again, at the end of the day, the only thing that I'm ever worried about is doing what's best for myself and my family, and then for my clients, and helping them understand why all these other people are trying to brainwash them into doing what's best for them, the government, the Wall Street, whatever it may be. Because you must be fucking crazy if you thought they were on your side, if they thought if you thought they had your best interest at heart. So whatever Hans' views are, whatever my views are, figure out what your views are and what you believe in. And then again, read this book and take more control. And so let's talk about how this book has allowed you to do more of that in your life.
Exactly. How did I get there? I look at the little market down the road for me. There's a girl that works there. She still wears a double mask. She still wears a little like oxygen sensor fan, double mask, and a little, I don't know what it is.
That's like wearing a double condom. Never mind. Yeah. Sorry, fuck it. It's going to protect you. More protection.
At least that actually does something most of the time. But like, she wears this thing around her neck that's like a fan. It's like an O2. I don't know exactly what it is, but she wears a double mask and all these protective measures. And I look at her the same way that I look at what most people think financial planning is. And I'm like, you're so brainwashed that you think this is effective in any way. You've never, like, how can I'll never be able to relate. We'll never have a conversation. We'll never have common ground. But I'm like, how do you think this makes sense? And that's how I view financial advice now. So how did I get there? In the time frame of me being in this group of pilots fighting the DoD, we ultimately got some lions in our group got the mandate overturned. Kind of spearheaded the effort to get these legal lawsuits going. Like, we've got some real, like, that's, to me, like, the military is not full of patriots. That group is full of patriots. Some of the men in there, the leaders in there, particularly like Commander Rob Green, who wrote a book and published a book called Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines about his boss while he was still active duty. And he's still active duty to this day, right? If you want to read some crazy, like if you think my story is crazy, I'm like a 2 out of 10 on some of the stories of what the Navy did or the DoD did. Defending Constitution Behind Enemy Lines by Rob Greene. That book will blow your mind. Anyways, in that group, over the course of like 2 years, we talk about a lot of other things besides the mandate fight. And so I talked often about economics and finance. I've always been very interested in finance from the personal finance. I was into like, the fire, movement, just the CFP, like what we generally call like Retirement Inc. or the CFP model. I'm just going to call it CFP. And by that, I mean the blanket, like you plan until you're 65 and you take 4% of that income and you live off 70% of your current income, like that general thing. I'm straw manning it because I can kind of steel man it now, and we'll get into like what I'm working on now. But like I understand kind of why they do that the way they do, and I also understand the incentive structures. But we're going to bundle that into one aggregor called the CFP, right? And so I was a big fan of the CFP model, Retirement Inc. And so I would talk about finances a lot, and Brian, my now business partner, would message me and be like, "Hey, dude, like everything you're saying is Austrian economics. Like the way that you approach this, because I'm very skeptical by nature, and I was what you would once call a conspiracy theorist. Now just confirmed all of these things were true, right?
There's no conspiracy. It's just not enough documentation to prove.
Right now, there's just enough hindsight. There's enough hindsight. We can see that it was true, and so. And I say that broadly, like a lot of the stuff for me was just COVID stuff. And it's like, okay, all the conspiracy theorists were right about COVID. A lot of them were right about economic stuff. And so in that sense, like I'm skeptical and I don't like the system after going through all of this. And the way I would describe economics, he's like, hey, dude, you're talking about Austrian economics, but you're treating, like you identify the problem correctly from the Austrian lens, i.e. what matters is individual behavior and taking it to a smaller level. But the solution, you're still talking about the CFP, right? You're applying the medicine. You don't trust the science behind the medicine, but you're still taking the shot effectively is kind of the analogy there. And so he's like, I think you would like this book. And he sent me Becoming Your Own Banker. And I get it. And I'm like, I open it up and insurance, whole life, get out of here. I'm like, hey, thanks, man. But I know better. So I tossed the book aside. I didn't think about it. But in the meantime, I'm benched from flying. I'm not doing anything. I mean, I'm a stay-at-home dad.
When is this? Give me reference on
2021, 2022.
Okay.
He sends me the book 2021 because I remember it was Thanksgiving of 21. We had just moved into our house here in Coronado. Sends me the book. We had been in contact. We talked a lot about like economics and stuff, but Thanksgiving of 21, he sends me that book and I toss it aside. And a few months later, I'm trying to make something of the time that I'm effectively unemployed. Like I'm paid unemployed, so it's great. But like I check the flight schedule. All right, cool. I'm not flying again tomorrow. I'm in this permanent limbo with no end in sight. And so I want to get something out of this. Like I'm always trying to learn. I love learning. And so I said, I'm going to get some job out of this. So I go and I start looking at like job sites, and there was one that popped up called Red Balloon, which came up out of COVID. And it was basically like a job board for people that aren't crazy, that haven't gone crazy with COVID. So it was like, really what it was employers that are not going to require you to get a COVID shot was like their starting mission. Like if you don't trust what's going on, but you want to get a job in this weird environment, this was the job board. I don't know if it's still a company or not, but I just kind of perused it and I was looking at like helicopter jobs. I was looking at different financial jobs and I looked at insurance and I thought, I basically said, hey, everything else I thought about the medical industry, about health, about the government, about the Navy, about public policy, all of it's been shattered, right? I'm going from the approach with all of these fields as in everything I thought I knew, everything I've been taught, I'm going to not assume it's wrong, but I'm just not going to bake it into the assumptions. Let's start from scratch. And so the same thing financially, I was like, hey, well, maybe I feel pretty educated on macroeconomics, having just gone through a lot of economics classes at HKS, learning from people. I'm a personal student of this. Like I nerd out. I've read the tax code front to back. I took a tax law class. I'm very into this, but let me direct that into something that I admittedly don't know. Because if you would ask me, in the Navy, you get a $400,000 group life insurance policy. It's been up to $500 since then, but at the time it was $400,000. And if you would ask me the first 10 years of my career, I would have said, yeah, I have insurance. I got SGLI.
I got enough.
Service member group life insurance, $400,000. Cool. Nice little check for my wife. I would love a check for $400,000 right now. I had no idea the concept of human life value. I had no idea the concept of insurability, anything we talk about, like basic stuff now. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to get my insurance license just to learn more about this thing that I admittedly is a very big weak spot in my understanding. And so I pick up that book again as I'm going through, and I pick it up with the intention of dismantling it. I try to disprove the premise of it, right?
God, I
And
think a lot of people pick it up for that reason. They're like, these people think they're smart. Let me go ahead and show them.
Yeah. And it was humbling because the more I tried to poke holes in it, the more I realized, wait a second, it's just a contract. Like, it's just a contract, and I'm embroiled in a contract law battle right now with the Navy. I took a class on it in grad school. I'm now living a dispute over a contract. And so this life insurance contract is a contract between two parties. And so I know it's enforced. The only parties that don't have to adhere by contract law apparently is the U.S. Navy. But in commerce, contract law binds. That's the only reason that someone, you have a part shop in Kansas. That's the only reason that you would send your parts to a factory in Indiana. Because of contract law, they're going to fulfill on this contract or pay the collateral. Like contract law exists. And so these are black and white contracts that we're talking about here. They perform as advertised. And that question now becomes, okay, does it make sense for individuals? And that's where I was still like, okay, well, it still doesn't make sense for someone to sink all this money into a whole life premium. And so I started diving more and more into it and eventually kind of realized, like, slap in the face. And I feel like, there was a period where I'm losing my Navy career. And because in aviation, like, timing is so rigid, the second I got benched for like more than a month, everyone knew my career's over.
You're like, it's over.
I'm not going to make commanding officer. Jeez. I could stay in and like limp along and make 20 years to get the pension, maybe, if this resolves. But there's no way that, like, I had a pristine record. I was on the golden path, we called it. Like, I admittedly, like, I had a very, very good career, and I was a top performer at every squadron I was at. That went out the window.
Crazy trajectory change.
Yeah. And that went out the window permanently. Like, once I got benched and I'm done, like, there's no chance I'm ever making CO, right? This dream, my wife and I always planned on me doing 20 years. I get the pension, I get the healthcare for life. Like, that was part of our plan. And now we looked at each other and it's like, all right, I know I'm not going to take this, but are we ready to actually give all of this up? And I got to figure something out. And so I'm going through this contract fight. I'm realizing this is a contract that works and is enforced. Now it doesn't make sense for me as an individual. And that's where finally I was like, okay, I have to just admit, like, I'm wrong here. I'm dead wrong. Dave Ramsey is dead exactly incorrect, like, provably, indisputably, not just like, in my opinion, does it make sense for this client? No, it's like mechanically, on the mechanics of a contract, you're wrong. You don't understand these concepts. And so I really kind of, once I realized that, I was like, all right, Brian, I picked this book a couple months later, I'm in. And now he's like, all right, cool. Like, we can start talking about policies. They're like, no, dude, I'm in. Like, I'm in. I'm not, like, yes, I'm going to start this for my family, but I'm in. And I felt this, like, there's times where I've learned that you let go. It's like cliche, but let go and let God. I was like, I need to stop trying to beg for this Navy job back, that God is slapping me in the face and being like, listen, dummy, this is not your path. Like, this has been a great path, but this is not your path anymore. And as I'm like kind of mourning the loss of this career that was stolen, this exact opportunity to partner with Brian, who's been doing this for 5 years, but is ready to expand, looking for a partner. And he didn't ask me to be a partner initially. I was just like, dude, I'm in. And he's like, all right, cool. Well, I've been looking for someone. And so I'm a pretty quick study, and I'm very, like, deep dive when I get into it. And so I'm like, dude, I'm in. I'm all in. I get it. I can talk this. I can now make the case for it. I think I have a strong background in being able to criticize it. And I can make the case, I can resonate with someone who has these concerns over it and counter them and actually walk through in a teaching manner. And so I'm like, this is it. This is my career. This is, all of a sudden, this is what I'm doing with my life. And if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be out of the Navy, not flying, I would be selling insurance, and let alone, God forbid, whole life insurance, like, it took me basically just being like, the path is so lit up here for me to just continue to try to, grovel and try to get back on track with the Navy. It's like, why would I do that? Why would, even if this all goes away? And when it did go away, I actually, this past week, I got an email like, please come back. Like, we need pilots. Please come back. I got it from the same
leadership.
No kidding. From the same department that breached contract and said I breached contract. The admiral in charge of that, no joke, last week said, Greetings from Millington, Tennessee. We value your leadership and your flight experience. If you're looking to come back to the cockpit, here's what we can offer you, right? They're trying desperately to get people back as they are creating with this Iran war, this enormous retention crisis looming. They're trying to get people back. So no joke, they want me back now. And I am like, good riddance, not a chance in hell.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so we started Remnant Finance. He had a company called Perennial Wealth, and we rebranded that to Remnant Finance. And we have been doing the financial strategy from the IBC perspective ever since. And we've done a really good business. Like, it's been amazing. It's been stressful because it's not certain, and you never really think about, as a business owner, my first 12, 13 years, I'm W-2. It's like a guaranteed check. You can find out exactly how much I make.
Checks. Yeah.
Yeah. You go look up, you can just do a search like 04 with dependents and 92118 Coronado zip code. Here's exactly how much I make. The whole country can find out exactly how much I'm making. The worst pilot and the best pilot get paid the same. There's stressors, right? There's deployment. There's other stuff that's stressful, but what's not stressful is money in like consistency of income. Now, I don't have deployments. I can control my calendar, but it's very inconsistent. And so overall, it's much, much better financially than before. But I could go, I can make 3 times what I made in the Navy in 1 month, and I can make 0 the next month, like very little the next month. And so it's been a wild journey, but yeah, that's kind of how I got to this.
To speak on that. So I got into insurance obviously in a much different way. And that was one of the biggest things for me early on. And that's one of the reasons why I love what we do so much, because early on I was just selling life insurance. Essentially, I signed on with an IMO and they were teaching me term, final expense, all that stuff. And so I got a look into that. And then their big thing was pushing IUL. So I learned a lot about that and actually learned about life insurance. Never knew that there was cash value, all these things, just again, coming in completely green and naive. But what's so cool on the income and money side when it comes to IBC and teaching people this concept, and that being the only thing that I do now, is sure, like months are up and down with how much you make, but the value and the quality of your service, I never question that more people are going to show up that want to be valued and heard and served in the highest level possible. And so at the beginning when I was doing this, not IBC, but just the insurance stuff, it's kind of cold calling some stuff or semi cold calling, warm calling, whatever they want to call it with their leads and shit that they did. But it was just like, I remember vividly in Washington where we live, where we literally just sold that house. When I first got in, a year or 2 years into this and doing these calls and, getting small little commissions from stuff and just trying to stay alive, and Amanda supporting us just multiple times, laying on the ground in my office, like, I can't fucking do this, man. This is too much. Like, this is so stressful. To go from that and all of that knowledge that I've accumulated over the years to now being 6 years in and having a very full understanding of how to serve my clients, IBC, all of this stuff, becoming a practitioner, and just knowing, like, if I'm just doing the right things for my people, those people will tell other people and more people will show up. And I'm never worried about my income now. And it's such a weight off your shoulders and stuff. And again, we've gone through so many processes within our life where we're seeking people to do a job that we're willing to pay for, and we can't get them to show up to do the job. And you're just like, what is this? Like, I'm trying to pay you to do the thing that you say you do for work, and you can't do the thing. Like, how are you a professional here? So one of the things that I really focus on is like being available for my clients, being proactive, constantly being in contact with them, being the initiator sometimes, because all I try to do is be the person that I would want the coach that has the potential to change the trajectory of my life be for me. I know that's what you guys do with your clients. You take very good care of your clients. It's 100% education based. People oftentimes don't even realize that I sell the policies. They're like, are you just like the educational? Educational platform? I'm like, no. I'm the full service thing. I'm hooking you up with the policy. I'm doing all this, but it's wild. But I know you guys are in a tight spot right now because, again, you were a team and they took half of your team away to go do this other BS stuff. And so it's trying to find that balance in everything and how you work with the dynamic of a solo versus a dual kind of attack on this. But, again, I've found so much value in the stuff that you guys have provided. And much like you, I may not be, I'm not going to Harvard, folks, but I absolutely love learning and talking to people like Hans, like Ro, who I've recently had on my podcast, other folks like that just you start surrounding yourself with these people and you're like, there is no way I can't win in life, whatever I'm doing, if I just keep surrounding myself with these type of folks. And again, focusing on these things that have contractual guarantees and these other parts. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about, you did say you've learned how to criticize the book, the concept, and that type of stuff. I want you to play a little devil's advocate on where you think this might have some holes or may not be the best for somebody, because I think we've both flushed out so many of those ideas. Then I want to know a little bit more about how you're using it in your life, how you fit it in your grand plan, and, how it just fits as this asset, and not the only asset, but this asset in your tool shed that you're utilizing for building wealth. Because I know you guys do a lot of other things, you specifically, and then, kind of some things that are up and coming with what you guys are doing with Remnant Frontier.
Yeah. So as far as I'm sympathetic to a lot of the critiques of either the book or the concept or whole life in general. And I'm sympathetic to them because I held them. So I held them at a point where I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know, but I understand the hesitation. It's a brutal marketing campaign, a very effective marketing campaign against fixed products like whole life and annuities, right? And
there's reason behind that, folks. Again, tin hat, put it on. There are reasons behind these certain things.
Well, yeah. And I mean, on that vein, read Edward Bernays' book called Propaganda. He is Sigmund Freud's uncle, I believe. And he wrote a book called Propaganda. He's basically the father of behavioral marketing. And so a lot of these things that are implanted in our heads, it's an intentional marketing strategy. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. If you read that book called Propaganda, it's not like propaganda like it's a negative thing. It's like, hey, how do we propagandize the people? I got paid to do that, and I did it so successfully that everyone now thinks breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? Why is skim milk considered healthy? All of these things are traceable, documented marketing campaigns, not like hidden knowledge or conspiracies. Like in his book, he talks about, here's who paid me. Here's what industry paid me to have a marketing campaign. The pork industry paid me to do a marketing campaign to get you to think breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Most people didn't eat breakfast. People didn't drink skim milk. Skim milk is a waste product. When you have milk, the heavy cream is the most valuable because it's the most nutrient rich, right? So you take raw milk, you take the cream off the top, and you use the whole milk, and then the skim is the waste product at the bottom. You feed it to chickens. So the dairy industry had a campaign, how do we make skim milk marketable instead of people feeding it to the chickens as a waste product? This is documented and bragged about. A lot of these things, you can trace the marketing campaign. Buy term and invest the difference is a marketing campaign. It's not a strategy. It's a marketing campaign. And so you have to be able to understand the origins of some of this. But at the same time, if someone knows what whole life insurance is from their perspective, it is a base only policy that they have because they were a lot of young guys, myself included as a young officer. There's a company that basically targets junior officers and gets them into high-load mutual funds and base only whole life policies, right? Now, I credit working with them, I do credit them because you take guys who are 21 getting paid for the first time and you direct something to savings. You get a 529 setup, you get whole life insurance setup, you get these mutual funds, you get your max out your 401k or TSP. You get kind of on these tracks, now very inefficient tracks from what I know now, but I do credit that idea of taking, locking away something from someone. I view now locking my money into 401k is not optimal, but locking money into 401k of someone who would otherwise spend that money, yeah, that's a great play, right? Yep. And so I had the whole life policy that got very, very little cash value. It was impossible to call the company. I had a stack of paper, and I had to call a 1-800 line and transfer 3 or 4 times to get any information about it, including when I eventually surrendered the product, which knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have, but I also wouldn't buy it knowing what I know now. And so, if that's what you come in with, and all of these videos, you're like the Money Guy podcast, their takedown of whole life. Everyone, when they talk about, when they do these takedown videos, they're using use cases that nobody in our community would ever consider. Like I would never do a policy like that. Mm-hmm. They're using, sometimes in that case, the money guy's video, like, oh, IBC exposed, the insurance companies, they're using a different product.
Yeah.
And they're using a poorly structured product that we would never use. And I agree, I would never use that product either. But these videos they don't understand it. And here's where before we get to what we're working on now and why, to do back to your question, like some of the challenges or critiques, like when you have that lens, and always it's the lens we combat every time, this is not an investment. Stop saying, why would I put money in here when I could put money in the market, right? All of these things, there's a lot of things that are like I don't think there's holes in the book in the sense that it just requires understanding what we're trying to do and why. And then it's like, okay, that makes sense. Like this talking point is no longer valid. But then there's other things where the talking points, the criticisms are flat out wrong. Like the insurance company keeps the cash value and only pays you the death benefit. There's things like mechanically, structurally, actuarially speaking are textbook incorrect. If they say they keep the cash value, but they don't pay the death benefit, what that tells me is that you don't know what cash value is. You have no idea what cash value is. And so from an actuarial perspective, you can be proven wrong, but someone who's dead set on that is not even interested in hearing it. And all they're going to do is comment in the comment section. And then when you say, no, actuarially speaking, the cash value is the net present, like you can have this conversation. You're like, whatever, loser, you're just trying to get a commission. Like those kind of conversations are pointless. But I say that I'm sympathetic to them just because I had them, I held them, and I confronted them. And I think intellectual honesty requires that you consider the fact that maybe you're wrong and be willing, Bayesian update. Like when you get a new piece of information, you incorporate that into your decision-making process, even if that means discarding previously held assumptions, right?
Yeah, which is extremely hard to do, especially now. I mean, especially when we're sitting at a place in time where the person that's leading the country cannot possibly be wrong. And so it's like, what a representation of the problem with our country when you can't take a step back and be like, maybe the things that I thought were true or the things that I said were not exactly wrong. Like I love being wrong and then learning the right outcome, solution, whatever it is, like that allows me to grow. And I'll, outside of like understanding contracts and guarantees and stuff where not going to be wrong because it's contractually in there. Outside of that, it gives you the platform to be like, I'm so open to just being like, oh, teach me more. That's how I'm going to raise my level and earn. And I'm always open to reevaluating my opinion on something when talking to somebody who knows more about something. But boy, just the perfect role model for the person that's like, nope, you're an idiot. And, this guy proves that I can just have one opinion and it's, roll with that.
Yep. And that's why we don't do too much. We don't do any marketing besides our podcast. Like I view the podcast as very kind of like self-filtering. Like people, if someone, like we're not shy in our beliefs. And so, people that aren't going to align with us and we're not going to be a good fit generally don't make their way on our calendar, which is okay. Mm-hmm. And I want to work with someone who's willing to accept that maybe they were wrong. Now, a lot of our clients come from our military, our pilot group, right? Because the guys that just got their entire perception on the military, their career path, the medical industry, healthcare, when that all gets shattered, you're ripe for thinking everything else might be off. Now, So we have a pretty big percentage of our clients that are from that group / kind of networking out from there. A lot of airline pilots, a lot of guys that, because airline pilots fly with each other. So you spend 8 hours with somebody in the cockpit and have conversations. So we have a lot of airline pilot clients. We have a lot of military pilots, military officers, and then a lot of friends and family of those. And I'd say network and referrals is our biggest source of business. And then the podcast. But other than that, like we're not doing marketing because I have had someone who's been a big advocate of infinite banking. I don't really think he understood it. He sought me out, wanted to talk about it. I kind of got like, you kind of know what you're talking about, but not really. He's since passed, unfortunately, about a month ago at 48. But he would send me all kinds of people. He'd be like, I have so many referrals for him. I'm like, awesome. This is great. I'm kind of pretty new in the business. I could use this. But he's sending me people that are like, Matthew said to get on your calendar about like an infinite account or something. And as soon as you hear that, you're like, oh, you don't want to be here. You're just doing it, like, or like, I'm here to get an IUL, I think, because like Pace Morby said that's how you buy cars effectively. Or like, what are we doing here? And so I got like overloaded with these clients where I knew like this is not a good fit. And so I'm like, hey, I'll work with you here if you want, but like I don't think this is what you're looking for.
You haven't come through the required educational process of either watching a video, reading a book, knowing what the concept actually stands for, IBC. Like, there needs to be some sort of filtering, which, like you said, the podcast normally is now, or some referral from somebody that has a policy that's done, probably a half-assed job explaining in most cases what it actually is, but still, that's better than the person off of TikTok that's like, heard that I can take loans from my death benefit right when we start and I got a line of credit. And you're like, shit.
Yeah, exactly. I tell every client, like, I want this to be the asset that you understand the most out of all of your assets.
Same here.
You probably fell into a 401k. We've talked about the concept of the financial junk drawer. You have all these disparate products, but this one, I want you to be able to explain to your wife exactly what you have and why we structured it the way we did. Doesn't mean you have to eat and breathe it like I do. So that's what we're here for. We're going to continue working with you. At 1 year, we'll check in and we'll be like, hey, I know that a lot of the stuff you got excited about, now that this next premium is coming due, maybe it's slipped. So let's have a conversation. Let's just refresh on what we're trying to do. We are here for full service. We have clients who use us for everything that say, hey, can you get me a loan for this or set me up like, we'll do all of that for you if you want. And we have clients who do it all themselves, but we want to be there for you because legally, there's no obligation for ongoing service. We are a middleman between you and the insurance company. They they work through us to help be the conduit to bridge that you don't work directly with them for the most part. And so once that contract's in force, it's a 2-party contract and we're not a part of it, right? So technically there's no legal obligation for us to do anything at all because we can't do anything other than asking. But we want to be there for ongoing service, and most people have lives and jobs, and they don't obsess over this stuff the way that we do, and they're not monitoring their policy. Like we are monitoring their policies more than they are in a lot of cases, and so we want to be there. Our motto is stop being a passenger. Stop being a passenger in your family's financial journey. We want you to be in the cockpit with us, and so like you're flying the plane, but we will sit there as your co-pilot. And, if we need to take the wheel to the degree that you need us, we are there. So that's kind of the philosophy we take with it. And you asked about the book and some of the criticisms. Like, I don't think there's valid criticisms when framed correctly. Like, it all makes sense. And I can still see a route where someone's like, this just doesn't make sense for me, but I get what you're saying. And I've never had someone who comes to the table with these objections who hasn't left at least saying like, even though I don't plan to implement this, I get why this talking point was wrong, right? Again, if you think that the company keeps the cash value but only pays the death benefit, that means you don't understand what cash value is. You're objectively wrong. And so when you teach someone that, they can be like, all right, cool. I still don't love cash value as much as you do, but I see what you're saying. I've had conversations like that before too. But where I think not that it's wrong per se, but where I think just like anything, it can be over sensationalized.
Yes.
And so the guys that are so much like a Nelson Nash purist that every single expense runs through IBC because you don't want to do business with banks. It's like on the philosophy spectrum, I'm an extremist, I guess. I'm a nationalist. I'm all about dismantling, government down to the bare bones. And I don't trust the Fed. I don't trust policymakers, all of that. But at the same time, I'm going to do business with banks when it's convenient and suitable and makes more sense. Like I will, for instance, we got a new car recently and the options were cash value. I had the cash value available or finance with the bank. I'm not going to pay cash, right? Paying the Dave Ramsey method is stupid unless you're bad.
That is the worst method.
If you are bad with money and you would otherwise siphon that money away, if that money would get spent over the course of the next 2 years, that money is just going to leave your economy. Paying cash could make sense. And there's people I know, I can name people where it would make sense for them to pay cash because they don't have a next best use case, right? So and that's part of the individuality of this. And that's why I hate so much when it's like a blanket case, whether it's for or against whole life, and usually it's against, nobody should have whole life. Like that kind of statement is criminal if you're licensed, but it's irresponsible if you're not licensed. And so the idea that like everyone should have whole life or everyone should pay cash, we talk about the reason you said like paying cash is the worst option is because we give up that money. In our case, $60,000 for a car. You give that stack of $60,000, 6 stacks of high society there. You give that up, and it can never earn for you again. But what if you don't have the financial IQ to earn from that? What if your best case of that, your next best use of money is sitting in a checking account, and then it's just going to get spent, right? Mm-hmm. Not that like we would look at that and say, hey, I can make 10% here, I can make 12% here. If I take a little more risk, I can make 15% here. But certainly I'm not going to give up my 60 grand because then it'll never earn for me again. Like when you understand that, when you're at that level, yes, spending cash is the worst thing you can do. If the money would otherwise sit in your checking account and you instead would siphon that money out on Amazon, frivolous expenses,
all sorts of things,
while also paying the dealership interest on a car loan, well, in that case, yes, your best case is probably using cash. And so it depends on the person. But in our case, I said, I'm not going to spend my cash.
I want to keep my powder dry.
The decision to me is cash value, a policy loan, or a dealer loan. And I said, I'm not going to pass up being able to get 4% on a car loan when it's like, for you know what I mean? Like, so I opted for the dealership loan because I want to keep my 60 grand and I want to pay them over time. And I don't mind paying that interest to them because the 60 grand for me could either be making more for me in low stress options or other investment vehicles or building my business, my new business, Remnant Frontier. I want that money to be working for me. And so when I stack those things up, getting back to my philosophy on this, I chose to do business with banks, i.e. take out a car loan, because that was a better, like I have better uses for my 60 grand that's in cash value than putting it into a car, right? And so that kind of analysis is like, it's very independent to the person. Do you have a better next use of capital? Do you have the discipline and spending habits to let that money get siphoned away, or are you going to responsibly steward it? So there's a lot to that decision. But I think that when guys are so dogmatic about I can never do business with banks, I'll take out a loan for everything. Like
extremes are never good in really any scenario. But I'm on board 100% with what you said. I think what this concept and the product provides you that is the most valuable is optionality. And at the end of the day, I want to have the choice to, again, I'm not paying cash just because I know, but go and get the 4% rates on the financing the vehicle and keeping my cash liquid for opportunities and have the availability to pay the loan off if something happens and take back control of that specific loan itself. Or again, sit on my money and wait for whatever to drop, real estate to drop, the market to drop, get in low on stocks, whatever it is, and just create that optionality. So like you said, much like understanding where you excel at, the person who maybe isn't, that knowledgeable about investing or growing their capital is going to say, hey, I want to use this on the policy loan for the car because I know I can play good banker and pay myself back and have more control. And cool, that's awesome. That is a great way to do it. But the person that's a little bit more investment savvy is like, no, I want to keep my capital dry, especially if I can get a lower percentage than the insurance company may be charging me to get access to that capital. It's all a game, but it's all optionality. One thing I want to go back on, you mentioned kind of the way that you approach handling your clients and the back and forth and how much they want to be involved or not be involved. And I think that's where your sister in arms, our now mutual friend, Natalie, with what she's creating with Policy Stack is going to be fantastic. And I'll have to update you. There's some big changes that we've been doing, but just that layer of communication that we're now able to have with clients, visually showing them and them having a place where it's not just, I'm just logging into this one thing that the carrier provides me and I'm looking at these few numbers and I'm trying to project out different scenarios or doing this on a spreadsheet like the majority of us have done. Actually having this like living, breathing system where I'm able to get in here and coach and teach, and then on the client side, actually see what I'm doing, whether it's tracking debts, whether it's tracking notes, investments, whatever it is, like having this actual thing that I can utilize and be coached through is going to be massive for just our clients, and I think the IBC community in general. So really looking forward to that. I know that you kind of nerded out with her a little bit, a few times about some of the things that are available there. But I know you're excited about that.
I'm very excited, and this obviously your community is your audience is tracking that for ours. And with your permission, if I use this as an episode, this will be the first time that most of our clients are hearing about Policy Stack. I've talked to a few individually, but because it's not quite ready for like full public clients right now, it's still sort of the beta testing. Just to tease it for my audience, if they listen to this on our podcast, imagine having like a Betterment personal capital, like financial dashboard, like you have for your assets and your general, portfolio strategy, but having that for your policies and kind of incorporating the two things together. It's an incredible tool. And I'm hoping to have Natalie on the podcast sometime soon to talk about it and walk through it. But yeah, we have the ability on the advisor side to interact with these policies and with clients. And you have the ability to see your cumulative cash value, talk about a loan strategy. It was cool. Like, having a call with a client recently that wanted a loan strategy discussion, I was able to pull up mine and just say, here's this tool that we could potentially use, and here's how you can go through, different scenarios of how you repay this thing back. And on that, the loan paybacks, that's kind of like, you asked how I'm using my policies, and that is one thing that I do differ from kind of the N&I purists. In how I treat my policy loans. And I don't think I'm like unique in this. I think I hear more people saying it this way than I do the purist, like, don't steal the peas, pay back your loans always, all the time.
Explain, because I'm sure we're probably on a very similar page with this.
Yeah. Okay. So in this case, let's say if I had taken out that policy loan to buy the car, that doesn't generate income for me at all, right? All I'm going to do, like, I'm going to continue to pay that policy loan. I fully buy into this idea of don't steal the peas, treat my cost of capital, treat my capital with as much urgency as I treat Chase Bank's capital, right? I get that. I fully support that for something like a car that is not producing asset. I will look at that. I'll say, here's what I would have paid Calco's Credit Union. Here's what I'm going to pay my policy instead. And maybe I pay more, maybe I pay the same. But yes, I agree. I'm fully there. If I'm buying income producing assets that are generating a positive arbitrage, if I'm outperforming what the interest on the policy loan is generating, I don't see the incentive to pay that back, presuming a couple of things, right? Again, back to individual behavior, but I'll speak to my specific situation. I use my policy for investment and growth. I use my cash value. I've acquired rental properties. I'm trading options out of it, invested in a real estate syndicate. I'm funding the build out of my new business to a degree from my policy and my cash value. Because I have rental properties in there, which can have costly repairs, I don't tap it out to the top. I don't go 98% of my cash value, right? I don't max out my loans. I keep a buffer, say 15 grand or something of not borrowed capital. That's my dry powder on my investment side of the strategy. My wife's policy, she has a pretty large policy. We use that as the emergency fund. I want a year, the way that I calculate it, I use Factum Financial's runway strategy when I'm calculating it, where they basically say, looking at your expenses, they dial it down to a daily burn rate. So I take in all my monthly expenses, all my annual expenses, all my variable expenses, fixed expenses, everything. And I say, here's how much I spend in a year. And I be generous on this, or I am generous on this calculation. This is including like eating out and subscriptions and things that if I had to trim down in an emergency would get cut. But currently at my current expenditure, what's my daily burn rate? And then I subtract out fixed expenses. I get a VA disability check. So I subtract that out because that's going to come in no matter what, right? And I say, okay, here's my actual capital need for the year. Here's my burn rate of what I need to produce in order to live on top of what I'm getting on the guaranteed side. Now, I take that and I look at my wife's account, and on my spreadsheet, it shows how many days of runway we have. So my goal is to maintain 365 days of runway at current expenses, which means that if we actually had a situation where we're kind of going into survival mode, I'm not making income, we want to travel for a year or whatever, we'll probably trim down a lot of that so that 365 might expand. But I keep 365 days of expenses in her policy, even though I'm not touching that to go invest. Now, is it a better use of capital? And this gets into your whole paradigm on financial. This is the CFP model. They'd say, well, why would you keep money here when you can make more money elsewhere? I'd say, okay, well, show me your phone. You probably have an iPhone, right?
Yep.
Why, if you just need to make calls, why would you not buy a flip phone and invest the money elsewhere? Well, it's because this has a different purpose than simply making phone calls, right? In the same vein, why would you keep a savings? Why would you have an emergency fund? Why would you keep $10,000 in an emergency fund when you can invest in the market and make more? Well, because the report card for those dollars is being evaluated. Every dollar has the same suite of possible attributes, but wherever it's housed, wherever the vehicle that dollar is in, whether it's in a savings account, stock account, options trading, crypto, real estate, all of these places where dollars could reside, they each have different traits that they're fulfilling. And you want to match the role and the need for those roles. So my savings dollars, their role is to be guaranteed and liquid. And that's it. Small yield maybe, but that's it. Yes, I could make more money on an emergency fund by investing, but that's not the purpose of those dollars. In the same vein, I could make more money by leveraging my wife's policy to acquire cash flow producing assets, and that would get me more dollars on net, most likely, right? But that's not the purpose of those dollars. And so that's where I could have tapped and said, I'll take a policy loan from that savings vehicle, and I tap that and go buy the car. But that's not the use of those dollars. My policy is used for investment. And on that note, I don't set a policy loan repayment schedule for myself above the interest rate. For me, I keep it interest only. I know going into the year, I have my interest rate. Lafayette says, here's the percentage that you're going to pay on interest this year. I say, okay, cool. I can calculate my cost of capital. Say I have 130 grand outstanding loan. I calculate my cost of capital for the year. Sweet. It's going to cost me $7,200 for the year in order to let $130,000 work for me, right? These are out. These dollars are out performing. They're employees. They're working out in their jobs for me, earning a yield, right? It's costing me $7,200 to do that. I'm not going to repay those policy loans because if I do, I free up that capital, yes, but then I want to get them out deployed again. I want them out. I don't want them doing one job. I want them doing two jobs. And so I don't view this idea of, they say like, well, treat your capital with the same urgency as you would treat Chase Bank. Well, if Chase Bank would offer me an unscheduled, unamortized loan on these terms, I would treat Chase Bank's money the same way. If they gave me basically a free guaranteed advance and I just had to pay $7,200 a year to have 130 out working for me, I'm going to do the same thing. And so that is how I would treat Chase's money. So I separate it into those two categories primarily as a starting point of when people ask about should I pay my policy loan, I say, well, Nelson Nash said you should always pay your policy loan, but I kind of think depending on what the loan is doing for you, it might not make sense. And so, and it's not like, people, I don't think advisors and I don't think clients are wrong who have the inclination to pay back every policy loan, regardless of what it's doing, on a fixed schedule, because that's how they view it. Like, it's not a wrong thing to do. We just have to understand, like, we have to separate philosophy from mathematics, and then they overlap, but they're not a perfect overlapping. Like, you paying principal on your mortgage in addition to your mortgage payment is mathematically inferior from a perspective of how do we optimize for the long term. It is. Again, unless you have no use of money, if you can make money anywhere else, you shouldn't pay principal on your mortgage if your goal is to have the most money later on and have the most cash flow now, right? But that doesn't hold water for someone who deeply values shortening the length of their mortgage. Doesn't resonate with me. Doesn't mean you're wrong if you view that way, but understand it. And that's where the gap is in the CFP model. They're not teaching you when you pay principal only on your mortgage, it's shaving time off the back end, but it's doing nothing for your cash flow now. Right? You still owe the same check to them regardless. And so those kind of conversations are the ones that we want to have. And getting into what we're building, we want to bridge the gap between IBC and CFP. I see a large gap there, and having now gone through Series 65, securities license, CLU, working on CFP, having gone through a lot of the actual coursework and curricula for these designations and licenses, I understand why there is such an enormous gap there. I understand why life insurance is, one, misunderstood, and two, wildly underutilized, is because you don't have to learn anything about this. And so I think you've probably had, and it's every IBC advisor has probably had clients that say, hey, I get this. I like my policy. I understand what I'm doing. I'm generating cash value, but my CFP doesn't understand. He's furious. It's blowing his mind that that I'm paying 30 grand in whole life premium. Can you, I try to explain it to him, but I don't live, eat, and breathe this stuff. Can you hop on a call with him and just explain it to him? I've done that so many times. And after a while, I'm like, you have no idea that the power of cash value as an asset. To them, cash value is just, okay, it's something that the policy slowly builds. And yes, you have a contractual right to borrow it if you want to pay interest, and that's it. We move on. Insurance can be encapsulated in, if you want, temporary coverage for cheap, you buy term. If you want permanent coverage for more expensive, you buy whole life. And if you want to tack on some market exposure, you buy an IUL. Pick one of those three and let's move on. That is all you really need to know. And in the CLU course even, there's very little mention of a policy loan. It talks about how in the textbooks you can take a policy loan. It's like, oh yeah, and that is something you can do is you can borrow against the cash value. But walking through it mechanically, like you have no need to understand these things that are central to us in the IBC world, these pivotal concepts and mechanics that are so important and so powerful when understood and utilized correctly. You don't even need to know they exist. Or if you know they exist, it's like you read 2 sentences about it. And so I understand why the CFP world, from an education perspective, I don't, like part of the thing you sign up when you're CFP, part of the charter, part of the requirement that you have to make with the American college that grants you the CFP is that if you don't understand something, their code of ethics says if you're not qualified to speak on something, you need to outsource it and find someone.
Refer it out, yeah. Or you need figure to it out, yeah, or learn.
Yes, exactly. Now, I think that every CFP that doesn't understand these facets of life insurance is violating that code of ethics. I'll call it out. I think that's actually happening. I think that every time you have someone who's like, oh no, you don't need whole life, you're just overpaying for coverage, doesn't take the time to think through and explain what cash value is as an asset, how it stacks up on the report card of traits of a dollar, and how the policy loan tool works, and how it's a phenomenal tool in your tool belt in the right situation. In most situations, to have it in your tool belt, it's like it makes you so much more powerful in approaching decisions. I don't think you can fulfill your fiduciary duty and uphold the American College's code of ethics for CFPs if you don't understand life insurance inside and out. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is bridge that gap. I want to be I'm not currently a CFP. I'm working on a syllabus just to get the designation, because it doesn't really matter. You don't need to be a CFP, but like for some clients it matters. They want to see those letters, right? And so I'm securities licensed now. I'm not a CFP, but I will say when I am a CFP, I want to be the CFP that the IBC community wishes existed. And I view this as defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. If we're playing this out, let's just pretend I'm not an IBC guy. I'm working with you. You have a client. When the main thing where I see the value proposition here is in the drawdown phase, in the decumulation mode, right?
Which
Anyone
nobody
can get
gets taught about. Yeah, exactly. That is the portion that nobody teaches. You got me here. Cool. How do I use this? Because I just spent all these years doing something, basically ingraining this thought process where I'm not going to touch this money. I haven't been touching this money. Now you want me to take it all out and use it, but I'm just supposed to follow this generic 4% rule? Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, like a clock subscription can get you index funds to get a large pile of taxable assets at 65. Like, you don't need an advisor to just invest in the market. Like, in the last 30 years, like, the debasement of the dollar is going to continue. Asset price inflation is going to continue. You don't need to pay someone to get you a large pile of money if you just invest it for 30 years, right? That's not where the value proposition is. Now, we're going to have some alternative investments. We're going to have some SPV plays. We're going to be doing options trading as a service. And we're going to have a model portfolio that I'm building out that I think is like distilling everything that I think, like, I spend hours every day learning about and studying markets and economics and trying to distill everything I learn into a portfolio that is buffer against what's coming. That's one of the things I want to offer. But in general, besides that, where the value really is I think when we think about Wade Pfau's work, Tom Wall's work, the Ernst & Young study, all these studies that say coupling these things together to the tune of maybe 30% in fixed, i.e. whole life and annuities, something Ro talks about a lot on your podcast and mine. The idea that if you can trim out the 3 or 4 worst market years in a 30-year selection, how much more money you have at the end.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And this is like, if you're a client of Shawn's and a client of mine on the CFP side, I think I could be the offensive coordinator, Shawn's the defensive coordinator, you're the protections and savings. Like we always say, we're not financial advisors, right? Protect, save, grow, in that order is our motto, our framework. We are protection and savings advisors. We're not financial advisors. Now, I want to be a financial advisor, but in this relationship, this is how the conversation should go. It should be, hey, Shawn, the market's down 10% right now, and the Smiths need $10,000 for this month. I don't really want to touch. I don't really have a good asset here that I can touch. I'm looking at the tax loss harvesting. I'm looking at our cost basis, but the market's down 10%. I'd rather be hands off and let this recover without locking in these losses, right? Hey, what do you have on cash value side? And you say, hey, we're good to go. We have 5 years of runway, bro. We're good. Let's take 10 grand this month from cash value, and when the market recovers, maybe we can pay that back. But like, I want these coordinated conversations to happen between between your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator. And the value here is like, if you're an offensive coordinator, you're not playing defense, you're not on defense, but your whole job is studying and defeating defensive, right? So you're not training the cornerbacks, you're not training the D line, but you know exactly what they're going to do and when, because you understand your whole role is understanding defense. That's the thing. Like, a defensive coordinator has to understand offense. That's their whole mission, is to counter the offense. And so coming from this perspective of, I'm an IBC guy at heart, I'm at core, I'm a pure Nelson Nash IBC guy. I understand what you are teaching your clients. I understand exactly how you're positioning life insurance and having these conversations. Now, when clients say to us, hey, all right, cool, I've got this cash value, what do I do with it? Well, for those clients who want someone in the cockpit with them doing AUM, that want to be doing the asset management side, that's traditional CFP, like, we have clients, we have a CFP partner. And if they're like, hey, I just want to do retirement planning, I don't want to think about all this, I get it. I'm stopping being a passenger. I'm becoming a banker. Like, I'm getting it. I want to be a part of this. I'm involved. I'm going to stop outsourcing my knowledge. I get it. But like, I have a job. I'm a welder. I'm a pilot. I'm a whatever. Like, I can't spend all of my time thinking about managing my portfolio. Can you do it for me? So we've sent guys to a referral partner who's a CFP. We send people to partners who do turnkey rentals, that do options trading, right? Like, these different ways to grow your money. Well, one of them I want to offer is, hey, if you want asset management and beyond just the typical, invest to 65, but if you want like an actual offensive coordinator that's going to work with your IBC guy, that's going to work with Shawn and understands exactly how he's positioning it, so we don't have this hostile conversation where it's like, you did what with my client's money? You put 30 grand into a whole life policy? To them, that is criminal. But to me, it's criminal that you don't understand anything about whole life insurance. And so how do we bridge this gap? How do we synthesize these two things into one holistic strategy that speaks together? And it's like, I think that there's a great value proposition here for both, we have our clients that have expressed interest in joining, but also like, you as an IBC advisor, if you send clients our way, you'll have a legally binding signed agreement from us that we will not do any insurance business, right? Like, we want to offer this to the IBC community, and we haven't really talked to many people. We've talked to you, but really, I think you're the only IBC advisor that I've really kind of vetted this through, like, how does this sound kind of thing. But like, that's my pitch to the IBC advisors who might be listening is, hey, I'm not going to do any insurance business with any of your clients. In fact, I will have a legally binding agreement that says I cannot do insurance policies for your clients. But when you have clients that want someone to be their asset manager, they want a CFP, even though they're taking control, that's where I want to position Remnant Frontier. And
they have, in my thought process is like, I have clients who have these assets that I can't give them any advice on because I'm not, I'm not qualified to do so. So I can give my opinions on what I might do in my own personal situation. But to have somebody on your team that you're able, this is how I pitch it to my clients as far as what I've currently set up with my 5 pillars. And, you've got your whole life as the foundation, you've got your investing, you've got your annuity, your guarantee portion, you've got your long-term care, and then you've got your tax strategy and your trust set up. Like, that is, if we can check all of these boxes off, you're going to be good. The idea and what you're talking about, I think, is just adding another piece to that normal person family office style thing, because now we're having communication within these different parts of our financial system that are talking to one another and that are on the same page, because almost always, like you said, the CFP is not down with what you're doing with your whole life policy or what you're doing on this IBC side over here. So it creates that lack of communication. Even if I wanted to chat with your CFP and create some sort of game plan, they're like, I don't even like or respect what you're doing over here. I think this is a joke. So there's disconnect, and that ends up working out poorly for our client that, again, should be the number one focus. So bringing that in-house and creating, again, this family style office atmosphere where we've got people that we refer out to for long-term care. We have people that we refer out to for annuities. We have people that we refer out to for tax strategy. And,
shout out to Travis McBride, our boy.
So all sorts of these great, again, family office style communications. Like, we have amazing communication with Travis. We have tax people, we have trust people, where they all get the idea of what this is and what we're trying to accomplish here. So I think it's great. I think you guys are going to do fantastic. And again, I have multiple clients that have assets that I can't give them advice on, that it's like, hey, let me go plug you in with this person that knows exactly what you're doing and what the plan is. And they will give you the guidance that you need to help grow those assets or do whatever you feel is necessary with them. But I think it's well overdue. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, on our end. I do want to touch on, you've mentioned it multiple times, and I want to touch on it because I've mentioned this in multiple of my podcasts, is the options thing. So I actually found out about low stress options trading through you guys, through your podcast. I think originally I had heard you talk about it when you first mentioned it. And I was in the mindset that at that time, I'm like, I don't do anything in the market. I don't know anything about the market. So when you guys mentioned it, I'm like, not doing it, not taking that on, don't care. And then I believe you had Troy on and you spoke again about it. And I listened to that. I'm like, damn, I would be stupid if I didn't look more into this and check this out. And again, that was quite some time ago. And so I ended up tuning into one of their overviews, got on the phone with Brian, kind of ran through it, vetted it and everything. And Amanda and I liked what the opportunity was. We like the control. We like the skill set that we were picking up. And we had been, quote unquote, burned by a couple of middlemen prior to this. And we're like, how do we take back more control of our money and kind of, again, get back in the cockpit of what's going on with this situation to an extent? And we know that the market is great for growth. If you know what you're doing, to an extent, there's a lot of opportunity there. So I just want you to quickly talk on your personal experience that you've had. I know you've had many clients that have joined in and taken part, but just nothing is perfect. We know IBC isn't perfect, or whole life insurance isn't perfect. We know none of these vehicles are perfect. But for the person like us that came in with no experience on anything about options, if you asked me what an option was, I would have told you I have the option to do one thing or the other thing. I have no idea what this is. And so we've been doing it, I don't know, coming up on 5 or 6 months now. It's been a little while. And again, not perfect, but boy, the trajectory of what is possible, not just on the income side, but like the flexibility. And if we wanted to play in the market, how people normally get into the market and how they're extremely worried about downturns and how there's no upside to downturns there. Just, I want you to talk a little bit about that, your experience, and we're approaching the 2-hour mark again. I don't care how long we go, but let's just roll into that.
I'm here for it. Yeah. So Brian introduced this to me. Brian found it through the Tom Woods network that he's a big part of. And we have since got about 50-55 of our clients that are trading, and we have kind of a group chat for our clients that are options traders. And it's phenomenal because it's like constant chatter about tickers we like, questions. You can ask dumb questions in there without, getting
that was a dumb question.
Yeah. So we have a great community of clients that are doing this. And the cool thing is, it's not just like everything. It's not hidden knowledge. It's just options trading is an enormous market. It's huge. And and the founder of this strategy basically just spent a few years back testing and trying different things until he came up with a framework that is reliable enough to conservatively sell options, i.e., in our case, selling insurance to people that think the market's going to go up, which I'm of that mindset, again, that Congress is going to keep spending beyond the budget. Therefore, the Treasury has to continue to offer debt. And when the debt is not fully purchased by the market, the Fed comes in and has to buy those indirectly through primary dealers. But basically, the money supply is going to continue to increase because we have to keep making enough money to at least pay the interest on the debt, which I believe any second now will hit 40 trillion. And so all that to say, I think the market's going to keep going up, which means asset price inflation. Most of what we're seeing in the stock market is asset price inflation, in my opinion. Over the last 30 years, this bull run is asset price inflation. And so if that's going to continue, which I believe it is, then I'm generally long the U.S. market, right? I would see it as a pressure release valve for the additional money that's being poured in, fire hosed in through programs like QE, which is kind of paused right now, but like it's going to come back when it needs to, right? They're not going to let the economy. They've shown that they are not like that. The stock market matters, and they are going to disregard economic fundamentals, sound economics, in order to keep the market from the catastrophic collapse that might otherwise happen if we had a sound monetary system. Now, all that to say, people are long and people want to buy and hope that their stocks go up. That is the entire CFP model, right? Everything we just talked about, like buying index funds because the market always goes up, right? Well, if you believe that, there is a way within options to sell insurance against that happening to people and collect a premium. And if the market goes down, then you are telling them that you will buy those shares at a higher price than the market currently is. Now, if you set that target price below where it currently is, you can generally look at the numbers and find a way where, say, there's about a 20% likelihood that this actually gets assigned, the stop drops lower, but there's an 80% chance that it goes up and this expires worthless and we keep the premium. So we view it as an income strategy, and we had really good success with it when you track it as income generated. Now, there's a lot of heartache when people don't fully understand and grasp the difference between what their brokerage shows and net liquidation value and what the platform shows on low stress options, because you could see a lot of people are looking at their balances on low stress options and looking at their Schwab brokerage account and seeing that one is twice as much as the other, and what gives, right? You have to really understand what we're measuring here, what each side is measuring, and how the real answer, I think, is somewhere in the middle. But I got excited about this because I took a derivatives class at Harvard Law as an elective. Again, hyper nerd. I took derivatives and basically to learn options trading from a securities licensed professional who wrote a book on options trading. So I approached it from like I am deep into the weeds trying to understand options. Let me check out this strategy. Brian approached it from much like you. Like I know what they are, but I don't know anything. I don't know anything about how to trade them. That was actually a better intro, I think, is going in blank slate.
Yes.
And that should be encouraging if you're like, I have no idea what you're saying right now. It should be encouraging that you can go through this training. I would say commit yourself to a month of going through this training, the core training many times as you can. And then you realize, okay, this is a pretty simple entry parameters that the founder Troy has created. If I stick to these parameters, I have a pretty high likelihood of collecting this income and the option expiring worthless. Now, in a big market downturn, a lot of people are seeing that's where we get into the difference in the balance there. But you need to understand how they're calculated, and you need to understand that I don't view this as money that I need in 1 year. If you view this as like a savings vehicle and you're trading options and you get assigned in a down market, you're going to be locking in. You're going to be stressing. It's going to be very high stress options. And so view this as something that's a long-term play. At least give yourself a 2-year window before you're touching this money. But when you view it that way, now that's touching the principal that you put in, because you can still, in the meantime, generate income. And that's where this really has a powerful strategy. And something that I know that Shawn and I both resonate with is the idea of cash flow over net worth. I don't care what my net worth is. Obviously, a net worth likely means I have more cash flow, potentially, but it doesn't have to mean that. I would rather have guaranteed cash flow. And then above that, I would rather have uncertain but fairly predictable cash flow. And so that's what we're trying to do here is we're trying to generate income each week by selling these contractual rights. And there's ways, when you understand the mechanics of it, how you can, what we call, roll it out. I know Shawn's explained all this. And so like, you don't have to quite understand this, but I think it's worth it. If Shawn has, like, he can put his referral link for this in the notes. If you haven't already done it, go click on his link, explore it. There's a pretty long copy page, but it's worth 30 minutes of your time. And I always say
pretty long is an understatement, but yes.
Yeah. If there's a 5% chance that this could drastically change, and the same thing we say about IBC, like, is it worth 30 minutes or an hour of your time to see if we can drastically change the course of your financial future? This is not a magic bullet, but it is a very strong candidate for how you interact with the market in a way that I love it. Beyond just the income side, and think about portfolio management. I'm working on what I'm calling Remnant thesis, which is a model portfolio that captures what I think is the best long view, like the 10-year view of where these current trends are going. A lot of AI plays are going to hit, a lot of them are going to flop, but there's obviously market momentum there, right? So how do we analyze this? And that's what I'm working on. So if I've identified stocks that I really like, well, could I make income on selling at the entry point that they're currently at, collect income, lower my cost basis a little bit, and then accept that if it dips down a little bit, I'm okay with it because this is a 10-year play for me, and now I own the shares. And so I don't mind the fact that, a lot of us are pretty heavy into tech and AI stocks, right? Because that's what was surging. So we're selling those. Those are what are popping up on the tracker. Now I'm assigned on a lot of those. Now I own the shares. Again, this doesn't have to make sense. If you know the strategy or you understand options, it makes sense. I've been assigned on these, but I'm okay owning these because I believe long term this is where the momentum in the market's going. So it kind of already aligns with what I call remnant thesis, which will be that portfolio that I'm generating myself. And so there's a very powerful income strategy component to this. And you give yourself plenty of conservative berth. When I'm planning for this, like I said, I'm not touching this money for a few years. I don't need it for a few years. And also, I'm assuming half the returns that whatever I'm currently making as my average return, because again, average rate of return is a fallacy. I beat that dead horse on probably 10 podcast episodes. I don't trust average rate of return. And the selling point of this strategy is we're targeting 1% income per week. Now, you're not actually going to hit that. It's going to be variable, right? But generally speaking, if you can do that, whatever my current average is, I take that in half and say if I make 50% of what I'm currently making on average when I'm making future projections. So be conservative with it. Don't view this as like every dollar is going to pour into this, but it's a very strong asset within your portfolio. And that's something within Remnant Frontier. This is going to be kind of a tailored side, sort of like a sleeve of this, but for a certain limited number of clients with a minimum threshold of starting capital, I'm going to be doing options trading as a service as part of our offerings within Remnant Frontier. But I think it's worth your time, and don't be persuaded to not act by the fact that you have no idea what an option is.
Well, if they listen to this podcast, they know that Amanda and I had zero clue what any of this stuff was, and we're having a good amount of success with it. Like you said,
I think you guys have, of everyone who's like learned this, vetted it, and is doing it themselves, I think the way that you present it, where you show your weekly receipt in these episodes, like I think that is the best possible way to do it, because it shows this is legitimately income that hit our account. We can show you exactly how much. And even if it's $10, if that $10 is 1% of the position size, and you made that by selling that this week, that's a really cool way of kind of visualizing it. I think that everyone who saw the way that you guys did that was like, oh damn. I myself, I was like, shoot, that's the move. Why didn't I think of that? That's a great way to walk through what you're doing and help teach it. So I think everyone should. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your future to vet this and give it a shot, because it is. It's not foolproof.
And nothing is. Again, nothing is. And just like with infinite banking, one of the things I love about the LSO, the options trading thing, is one, long-term thinking. This is fantastic. Like it can be great whatever age you are, but if you have a little bit longer runway, the longer your runway, the more beneficial this is going to be, because like you said, we know the market goes up over time. So if I get assigned, I now own stocks, whatever, I'm not worried, because I know as long as I did my due diligence on the front end and I'm not holding, some BS stock that I probably shouldn't have traded in the first place.
Yeah,
but
all birds.
That is going to go up over time. So love the time on your side thing. The other thing I really love about this, somebody asked me recently, they're like, is it just like giving trades away? Like, am I just doing copy trading or whatever? I'm like, no. This is a legitimate skill set that you now learn that you can take anywhere in the world. And that was a big thing for us, because Amanda, my wife, is going to be leaving her job when we move halfway around the world to Vietnam here in 6 months. And we were looking for a replacement for her income. And so this was really something that she was looking at doing. And we were focusing on like, hey, what can we do to help replace this income? We've got 2 very young kids now. And the thought process was it needs to be efficient enough that we can do it in a reasonable amount of time. It needs to be easy enough that you don't have to just spend the next year or 2 of your life trying to learn how to do this. And it needs to be just something that you enjoy doing. And so this checks so many of those boxes. And she's really been the one to spearhead the learning process. Of course, we both went through the training. We both learned everything, but she's the one actually active making the trades. It legitimately takes her, as a mom with a brand new 3-week-old baby at this point in time, an hour or two at most a week to do this. And the income that it's been generating, and again, long-term thinking, I've talked to people that I've referred that are like, this might not be for me because they were looking for a little bit more immediate results, cash flow. I want to be spending this money right now. So when I get a little tied up in my position, oh no, I'm not as liquid, and the cash flow isn't as good as it should be. This is not for that. This is that little bit more long term, like you said, maybe 2+ year time horizon, but the longer, the better. And again, the skill set that I now have that I can literally take anywhere. Like, we stay in the community because there's tons of value that's provided there. But boy, we have this skill set now that, fuck, if the community dissolved and, nobody ever talked about LSO again, like, we would have this thing that we can go anywhere in the world and make money doing, and at a pretty, efficient clip. So this paired with your policy, I think, is gold. The time horizon for both of them is gold. And like I said, if you're not willing to invest a little time in yourself and learn about something that a lot of us have been saying could be a game changer for you, especially paired with a policy if you have one, then, what are you doing? What are our goals here? Let's figure that out.
This is my favorite. This right now is my favorite use of capital. Like, this is the floor for $1 if I'm going to take a cash value, if I'm going to take a policy loan $1 and put it somewhere, this is the floor it has to beat in order to be justifiable going somewhere else. I do really love this strategy. And I think that you're right. You're not just buying somebody else's picks and copy trading them. You're learning a skill that's portable. It's phenomenal. And man, when you guys moved to Vietnam, like, the portfolio size you would need to generate income to cover living expenses in Vietnam, it's like, you never need to really.
Yeah.
Like, it's
insane. Insane. And so again, I think one of the things that a lot of people should focus on is get clarity on what that number is for you. What are we trying to obtain? I talk about it in my book. I talk about it a lot on the podcast. There has to be, I'm not saying an end goal of like, once I hit this, I'm out or whatever, but you got to kind of have that number where a lot, the guys over at Wealth Without Wall Street talk about, your passive income number, and expenses or passive income greater than expenses equals freedom. But you got to kind of figure out what that number is. And to tie this to some other people, the guys over at Factum really focus in on figuring out what that number is. Just like you talked about that burn rate, I'm figuring out what I really spend, what I need to spend versus what I have to spend. And then again, figuring out how we can start building something on top of that to start closing that gap as far as what income I have that's passive versus not passive, and how I'm checking these boxes off to minimize that space between those two numbers and creating something, that's providing cash. So I've loved it. Thank you guys so much, especially obviously Brian for getting involved, but for you being as knowledgeable as you are and doing your due diligence on it. I'd love to talk to you more about it just outside of this and kind of look at some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
We could just keep going. Is there when you're talking about policy loans and taking policy loans and what you're using your money for, what is your thought process on, all right, so money comes into you. Are you constantly trying to max out what they give you for PUA? Is that like, give me your process of money comes in. Does it go here first? Do we put it into options first? I think a lot of times people are like, I don't know what to do with the cash I just got. Where should it live first?
Yeah, so on the question, I've had that specific question of, I'm really interested in options. I'm really interested in IBC. Should I fund my options account, use the premium or use the premium collected, i.e. the income I make from the strategy, to fund the premium of my policy, or vice versa, take a policy loan to fund the options? For me, it's a no-brainer. It's not even a question. It's policy first, because one is certain, one is not. And one, if things go wrong, like if you have to liquidate some of your positions, if you are in that situation where you've been assigned, like, you could be taking losses that are going to take a long time to recover from on the income front. And so I think that's a no-brainer. But for me, I like my capital going into the policies first, not to the extent of like, when I get paid, things that are required, are just going to get paid. Like I'm not going to
Yes,
go into
100%.
my policy just because so that I can take out a loan to pay XYZ expense. Like I'm not that. I love PUA, but it's not a filter for every dollar. Like I have a bypass valve, but anything that's going to go into savings or investing, that's going to go into the PUA first. And right now, for the first 3 years, I maxed out, 50 grand a year into my policy. Just like balls to the wall, everything is going in here, right? And it's a Lafayette policy, which means that thing is pumping now, right? Because I went heavy on PUA initially, 3 years in. Like the way that they structure their policies, it's at the point now where it's effectively cash on cash. I don't need to worry about as much PUA. I still put PUA in, but I have not maxed it out. This is the first year 4, where I changed my withdrawals to base only, and I'm not paying the PUA automatically. I'm paying it in throughout the course of the year when I want to.
Yep.
But I'm not super concerned about when and if I fully max it out, because I've gotten that policy efficient, and now it's just like it's a bonus for every additional dollar. But at the same time, it's the same thing with my wife's policy. It's the same way. My daughter's policies, I'm not putting as much into PUA in their policies because it's such a long time horizon on them. But generally, I do like to put as much as I can in there. Lately, with Brian being deployed and our 2-person business being cut in half, it's been a little bit of a slowdown for our business, and I'm focusing both time, energy, and capital on building out Remnant Frontier. And so right now, I'm not as spring loaded for money to go directly into PUA right now. I'm paying a little bit each month. And one thing I do is just as like a tactic, I guess, a personal strategy. Every time I'm on a call with a client and I want them to, when they ask questions about, well, how do I actually pay a policy loan? How do I actually take out a policy? How do I make, what do you mean? Like, how do I pay PUA? Does it just come out, annually when I make my premium payment? I have to pay the whole thing. Like when we're talking premium mechanics, policy loan mechanics, every call I log into my Lafayette portal and I say, I'm just going to show you in 3 button clicks, click, click, click. I just paid $50 of PUA. I do $50 of PUA on every call. Not everyone, it doesn't make sense, but like if we're talking premium mechanics, I pay $50 into PUA just to show them. And then I also pay $50 towards a policy loan just to show them. So every single call I'm doing that. And it's sort of like, I want them to see in the course of 4 button clicks how easy it is to do those things. Take a loan, pay PUA premium. And so I'm chipping a little bit in. I mean, there's like negligible, but I'm chipping a little bit in here and there on every client call just to show them. And then on top of that, every week when I get paid, a chunk goes into PUA, unless it's like a really thin week. Because with this business, it's naturally kind of cyclical.
Yes.
And there's some weeks where like, I'm not going to put anything in it. Like we get paid on Wednesday, or we pay ourselves on Wednesday. So this morning I wake up, I take my check, I put it through my filter, 30% to my business, 70% to personal, 70% personal goes into this, and this, 10% to tithe, 10% here, 15% here, whatever. And so at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm not going to do any PUA. I didn't do any PUA today. Right. But every week I generally put something in there, but, I'm not dogmatic about it. Like every dollar has to go here first. Especially now, if it was my year 1 of my policy, I would be. But now that I've already gotten my policies to a point where they're efficient and every dollar in, even if it's just base, is already generating a dollar of cash value. I don't do the mentality of like, now I'm never going to put PUA in because the base is sufficient. I don't like that approach, but I'm also I don't need to put in my full suite of or my full allocation of PUA right now. Hopefully I max it out by the end of the year, but if not, I'm not like low stress IBC. Like I'm not super worried about it.
I love it. That's a great approach. Yeah. I love that idea. Awesome. Damn, man. Anything else? We're going to have to do another one.
Ground. Yeah.
We're going to have to do another one.
I mean, we'll do a part 2 where you come on, we'll introduce you. I want to hear your background. Like moving to Vietnam, like you got some crazy travel stories I want to hear. So we'll have you back on and then we can, take up all the other, places we could take this one in the future.
For sure. For anybody listening to this right now that maybe in the Remnant Finance sphere, my intro story to this is not nearly as interesting as Hans is. Yeah. So, man, I think that was fantastic. Again, quick shout out to his show if you guys don't already know. So I actually have a list of a playlist on Spotify that I put together that I share with clients. And it's just kind of like an infinite banking education list. I know that's not clear, but I've got almost 90 hours in there, and I just go through and I add podcasts of people's stuff that I like across our industry. Again, it's just called Infinite Banking Education. I think I have 121 people that follow that and listen to it, but awesome. I update it on like a weekly basis because all I'm doing is consuming information. So when I find good information, like that crazy podcast that Caleb just did with Dave, who unfortunately, or Dan, I'm sorry, Dan, who unfortunately passed away. I'm like, man, ton of value in here. I'm going to add this to the playlist. And then people can just go through and get a lot of different voices from, different folks across the industry. But I have multiple of your guys' stuff in there because, again, I think there's tons of value. So I think most of the people that listen to what I do are very familiar with Remnant Finance. If you guys are not, go ahead and go check out their stuff. I'll put the link for their podcast below. I heard you talk about this with David over at Factum. Like it is a, how do I want to say this? Like there's no scarcity mindset with what we're doing here. Like I'm not worried that somebody's going to listen to this podcast and be like, ooh, I think Remnant is for me. I don't want to work with Shawn anymore. Or if I was considering working with Shawn, I think I'm now going to work with Hans. Like fantastic. Again, we want you to work with whoever you want to work with. The goal is to get you to where you want to be. And we know if we do this at the level that we know that we can do it at, serving you and providing you with value and information and coaching and mentorship, so much more will end up coming our way. And in a country of 300 plus million people and a debt clock that's ticking, like you said, 40 trillion plus dollars, basically, like we know there's a need for what we're providing for people. So whether you get it from me, whether you get it from the guys over at Factum, whether you get it from the guys at Remnant, whether you get it from whoever, get it. And then just figure out like, hey, these are the people that I align most with. Like, I like these dudes. So I just appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing all this knowledge and wisdom. And for the people that made it through 2 hours and 15 minutes of a podcast, I thought this was fucking Joe Rogan for a second. We were going in, but yeah, man, looking forward to coming doing yours. But anything else that you want to leave the people with before we wrap this up?
Well, if the idea of Remnant Frontier and what we're trying to pose there makes sense to you, if you're a client of Shawn's, right now my goal is doors open by the end of October. The attorneys are currently working on the operating agreement. The compliance consultants are doing their thing. Like the business things are happening, and it's all just kind of a waiting game when California gives us the effective registration. So I'm hoping it's sooner, but I'm hoping by the end of October, we are ready and open for clients. In the meantime, it's kind of just generating a warm list. Like I can't take any commitments. I can't get any, like nothing's like structural yet. So it's sort of just vague, warm interest. But if you are interested and you want to shoot me an email, we're on remnantfinance.com. And then if you are an IBC advisor that's listening to this and somehow has made it this far, if you think that like that kind of working relationship, is something like I would like to talk as well. Because what I do want is people that are somewhat interested, I would like to see like, hey, how can I tailor some of our offerings to your clients? How can we tailor what we're doing? Because I want this to be something that's so symbiotic with how you're already teaching your clients. And so I appreciate any feedback from IBC advisors who are like, hey, if you talked about it this way, if you did this, I'd be more inclined. But yeah, like reach out. We're at remnantfinance.com. You can find all of our stuff there. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, man. It's been a great conversation.
Sure, man. And we'll do, again, another podcast on our end as that October date approaches. If things, start to come about that we're like, hey, this is launching. We're good. We're close. Like, let's get back on and talk about this. But I think it's something that, again, a ton of people in our space will get a ton of value from. Again, you can just, not that we're trying to like block people off from some of the outside noise, but there's a lot of BS noise out there that doesn't allow you to sift through the things that you actually need to be learning and hearing. So again, we don't think we're better than the people that are teaching you whatever they're teaching you, but we just want you to get both sides of the coin so you can actually make the best decision for you and your family, and your legacy. And I think bringing this stuff in-house is definitely the way to do that, and having somebody that is not biased between one product or another product, or one process and another process, is really, the fiduciary word is a complete fucking joke to me, but somebody that actually has your best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Because, that's the way that we do things. So
I personally think that what we're going to offer is different than your typical CFP. Like, you're just middle of the bell curve CFP. I think we're going to have a unique offering. Personally, I'm really excited about it. But even if not, even if we are exactly identical in performance, cost, everything to your current CFP, if there's this one difference of, we understand and utilize whole life, we understand IBC, and we know exactly what the conversations you've had with your IBC advisor. Like, if we can at least just have a symbiotic, a good relationship on that front, where my first question is going to be like, how much life insurance do you have, and do we need more? Like, I think that this is so important. It's not about, let's dial down the cost of life insurance so we can invest more. Like, it's the opposite of what I want. And so I think we've got a good value proposition, and I'm excited to offer it to the IBC community. Looking forward to getting that started, and I look forward to having you on our podcast as well.
Yeah, man. Well, as always, folks, the information is free, but the knowledge is priceless. We'll catch you on the next one. And yeah, thanks again, man.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, man.
Peace, y'all.